where so-called experts don't actually know stuff. I mean, obviously ignoring all of history, because, I mean, so-called experts are wrong about the majority of things the majority of time throughout the majority of history. So that's their safety blankie. That's their blankie. Don't take away their blankie. Now, the flat earth, it's going to be taking away their ball, but it's not just about that. Like, if you look at any triggering topic, it's taking away their blankie. Like, look at statism. Like, a lot of people, they'll defend the deadliest cult in human history as somehow being necessary. That's their blankie. Like, they can't handle not having their blankie. That's why when you remove the topic, it makes it all painfully obvious. But big shout out again to all the people in the chat clearly proving that.
Interesting. All right, so I think we kind of got the main point of it. Let's see if he has anything here.
Lucky, don't take my blankie away. Yeah, I mean, it all comes down to that blankie. That's why the cult of authority worship is so dangerous. I actually did a couple podcasts on both scientism and the cult of authority worship, which examines some of that psychology. And here, for the purpose of this podcast, I just really wanted to point out that probably the easiest way to see this is to simply remove the topic and observe how certain people so-called argue. Any final questions here? But again, big thanks to the chat for making this so clear. Especially Tsusaka, some of these other guys too. TMM here, just notice how it's all flat earth triggering instead of actual arguments. So once you remove the topic, you know, what's there?
Yep, that's pretty much it. So that's the main point, I guess. The psychology of the debate. When you remove the subject itself that you're debating and you just observe the people that are debating, you can obviously see who's using emotion and logical fallacies to argue versus who is sticking to, you know, sound argumentation.
That's kind of that's interesting. Yeah. Is he saying to do that? Like, is he saying like even if you he's like to listen to it by separating your mind and just listening to like the emotion, the argumentation, the stability of the actual logic, and just view it from that point instead of like actually thinking about the topic, like kind of invert it.
Right.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
I think that was illustrated last night when I was bringing up observable physics and reality and trying to have a discussion about, what we see and measure and observe. And the response to me doing that was, people calling me an idiot or whatever.
Actually, it's the exact opposite. You got schooled so bad, and it was so embarrassing for you, and you still realize it? Oh, my God.
Case in point.
Right.
Well, but it could be emotion.
Last time we debated, you made up a fallacy, Jesse.
Jesse does stay pretty calm. I will say that. Pretty cordial.
Part of the tactics.
Yeah. Well, also I was going to say there's like emotion on both sides of it. Like if somebody was being, like you could say it either way. If somebody was being really emotional, that means they could be, let's say, wrong or insecure or not having good arguments, etc. Or possibly somebody could be really emotional and have really good arguments and just be on fire. Now, now if there's like ad homs or insults, that's kind of another layer because that's kind of like poor etiquette, obviously, and like not respectful. But I'm just saying, whereas on the other side, if somebody was really calm, like extremely calm, that could be a good thing, possibly. Or it could actually be something where they're using it potentially as a tactic or as some kind of a way to get under the skin by, by having like a monotone voice or something. I'm not talking about Jesse necessarily. I'm just saying in general. I'm just saying, so what do you guys think of that idea? That like being really calm could go either way and being really emotional could go either way in terms of like what actually is coming through?
Either way, if you remove the topic, like which is his point, whether they're emotional or non-emotional, if you're just examining the arguments themselves and take the topic out of it, because it could be any topic, it could be abortion, it could be anything. Like for example, with abortion, right? You could say, abortion is basically the biggest killer of children in America, bar none. And then someone would be like, well, you really think that the clump of cells is actually a child? Right, people can make, or like, well, what are we supposed to do in instances of rape? Are you saying that she has to come to terms? Like, you see what I'm saying? Like, people can turn the argument into an emotional one by arguing for the extremes rather than the logical middle, essentially.
Isn't that part of the tu quoque?
Yeah. That is part of it. Tu quoque, by the way, I would categorize that as an emotional fallacy, 100%. Because when you're defeated in an argument, what else do you have to do? Like, that's it. That's all you got left. Is like, well, what about yours? What about your looks? Like, if someone was making fun of somebody for how they looked, like, hey, you look kind of fat in that shirt. Oh, well, you don't look like, you know, you're not a supermodel yourself. Well, we're not talking about me, right? You see what I'm saying? Like, a tu quoque is always going to be an emotional defensive mechanism for when someone's losing the argument.
Yeah, we always kind of know that from like I think a lot of us probably growing up. Like, I mean, I grew up in the 80s and 90s, and like when someone does that, it's always kind of like they lost in a way.
Yeah.
Whatever it is, like doesn't even mean there is something that you have to win or lose, but you know what I mean. It's always kind of like the weaker position. It seems like when people do that, where they just kind of try to flip it on you, turn it right back, and just use some like if someone says, "Oh, I don't think we went to the moon," and they're like, "Well, of course you don't. You think the Earth is flat," or just some kind of other like trying to just put some criticism back on the person, even though the original thing was like, we didn't go to the moon kind of thing. That's kind of an ad hom plus that though, but it's like deflecting the criticism right back to the person who initially actually said something that could have some valuable response to it, instead of just like it's like I know you are, but what am I? Essentially.
Yep. Jesse, what are you talking about from last night?
Well,
Specifically.
I'm uploading the whole discussion. I had part 2 already uploaded, and then part 1 is going right now.
Well, anyone who knows like the history of like this whole live stream, let's say it's like 4+ years. I mean, I've debated with Jesse and stuff, but I don't think any other time that I can remember I've really like kind of like I felt like I was kind of repping for him in a way, because he was staying very calm, and I actually partly was agreeing. It was all about the pragmatic fallacy, because I actually do think Jesse was like pointing out something that I think about the pragmatic fallacy as well, and he was kind of sticking to that factor of it. I'm not saying I agree with everything he was saying, but there was a part where he was sticking to that, and then in that case he was kind of just giving the calm, trying to get to it, and then people were kind of interrupting and ad homing times and whatnot. I'm just saying I kind of was like I've never debated with Jesse, and I don't really feel like I did. I didn't really do that, but I was kind of like somewhat parallel with what I thought he was getting to, and whether he even I don't know if Jesse even thinks that I was that I was doing that, but that's what it seemed like, the way my mind was.
What about the pragmatic fallacy, though? On what?
Galley was pointing out some of the fallacies, and he was getting ad homed from Cole and Left Lane, and he was trying to point out that if I have a fallacy, please actually show my fallacy rather than say you're just wrong because you're a flat earther or whatever it was. And then you can just listen to the whole thing again, maybe.
What he was wrong about is he said just because something works does not prove that it's correct. Therefore, nothing that works, it demonstrates that anything is correct. It's ridiculous.
No, he didn't say
that.
That's
the absolute statement. That's the absolute statement that takes it out of context and tries to make it into something he wasn't saying, which is what he was accusing you of doing, and you just did it again. You come in and say because things work,
that's exactly what he said.
Anything, but you're saying nothing that works.
That's exactly what he said.
You're making an absolute statement out of it. It makes it. It's not. Oh my God.
I got you. Left Lane. All right. Do you know about the pragmatic fallacy, right, Left Lane?
Yes, sort of.
Okay. Could you provide an example of a pragmatic fallacy?
Do you remember the one from last night?
Oh, there was a good example last night. It's like
something that you can accept though, as like
a that taking a particular vitamin makes me well. Therefore, that particular vitamin cures illness, or something like that.
Yeah, like vitamin C, for example.
Or this medicine makes me feel good. I feel good, therefore. Cause of it.
Or believing in ghosts might make somebody deal with grief, so therefore ghosts must be real.
See,
that's malicious.
Pragmatic uses does not make the thing that is claimed true. Like, for example, you got kinetic gas theory, right? That we think gas is just billiard balls just bouncing off each other at enormous speeds, to the point where in order to measure the gas pressure, right, you would have to have it contained. And like what what the pressure is claiming is that like, oh, there's these millions and millions of balls bouncing off each other, bouncing around into this box, and that's what's actually happening. Versus, you can create a pressurized environment, but just because you can create a pressurized environment doesn't mean that there's actually billiard balls bouncing off of each other.
Foucault's pendulum. Foucault's pendulum is precessing, so therefore it must mean the Earth is turning. Well, that's you're jumping to conclusions, and then the whole
That,
Superman with the broken window came into.
well, the Foucault's
Dude, I
pendulum
don't
is
know why I
affirming
always
the
go to that one.
consequence. It's affirming the consequence. I'm saying a pragmatic fallacy is like, you're actually using something. What do you use the Foucault's pendulum for?
Well, but you're saying it's not practical, but it is
Not
like
a
a practical
pragmatic thing.
But I guess it's a practical demonstration of a phenomenon because we were saying how like similar affirming the consequent, begging the question, and pragmatic fallacy all are. There's like a similarity with all three. There's a lot of overlap.
Right. They get intertwined a lot.
But then I think like the other side to it though, which I thought is kind of maybe what Jesse was getting at, whether he was or wasn't. That's I don't know. Maybe I could ask him what he perceived of that because I don't know if what he even perceived of it because I was just kind of in the flow of it. But the thing I kept thinking about too though is that the thing is that if something works, it may work because it's true. So, like I even brought up like really not trying to take it to religion, and I'm not trying to kind of hit any like hot buttons to get a hold like get that all going necessarily. But like for example, well, it's like similar to the believe in ghost one. Like if somebody said like they believe in Jesus and then these good things happen in their life, does that prove that Jesus is true or that the whole story is true? Kind of an example. But the thing is that if the thing is true, like let's say Jesus was an archetypal being or entity who was actually doing that, then that person it wouldn't really be like it's working because it's true in that case. Like let's say you are, or even in the ghost analogy, like if a ghost is helping you cope with grief, therefore ghosts are real. Like that would be the fallacy. But what if just logically considering that if the ghosts were real and if they do help you cope with grief, then that would also work, or that you would then feel better because of that. So it's like to trying to the parallel, it just seems like I kept saying it was like very nuanced in my mind because it just seems like there's a fine line between like the reason something works, like if you apply heat to water, it's going to boil. It does work, but it works because it is true. Whereas the fallacy part would be just because it works, and that's what Gally was saying about the contingency part of it.
Right, they would never say that though because they even claim that science can't prove anything, that they don't know anything, that you can only get a best guess. So to say that something is true because it works, then that's going against their own paradigm of knowledge claims.
It's also a lot of their arguments are based on like the perfect example. The perfect example might be like the internet. We're talking to each other on the internet right now. So satellites must be orbiting the Earth in exactly the way they told us because we're talking on the internet.
Yeah, dude, that's exactly what I was going to say. The same thing. Yeah, they say that all the time with things like, satellites work, therefore Earth's a globe, and the satellites are free falling around a ball.
If they're running Starlink, that's true.
We get signals from the sky, therefore satellites are orbiting around and free falling in a vacuum. Just because the signals work. Now, Witsa used to bring this one up with the satellites, actually, the pragmatic fallacy, like quite a while back.
Yeah.
He used to bring that one up a lot.
I see Anchovy advocating for Jesse. I did ask Jesse, and he never got to speak. Go ahead, Jesse, about like what if you remember last night.
Oh yeah, Gio described it perfectly. It was about the pragmatic fallacy.
What was the topic?
What did and did not constitute a pragmatic fallacy?
Oh, literally that. Okay.
It was literally about, what did and did not constitute the pragmatic fallacy.
It's two parts to it, right? You have to have something that is actually utilized, right? That has utility, it has use, it works. People do it all, people use it all the time. I can use it. Everyone can use it universally. And then the other part of it is the premise on why it works. Now, the premise on why it works, if you're saying, well, it works, therefore the premise on why it works has to be true, that's where the pragmatic fallacy comes in.
So Jesse's main point, though, was he was asking whether or not the Cel-Theo was a pragmatic fallacy in its conclusion that the Earth is flat.
Oh, yeah, I don't even know. Did we get into that? Actually, Alan's starting in like a half hour.
Yeah. So I don't know. My opinion, just generally, it is. But the trick is with these fallacies, like even Winston has said this before as well. I mean, literally everything can be almost categorized as a fallacy at some point. There is nothing that escapes it. It's a tool, it's a technique in conversation, trying to get to the core of the truth. But at the end of the day, I mean, it would seem that almost everything constitutes a fallacy, so far as I can tell. I shouldn't say that as absolutely, but unless someone's got another contradiction of that.
Oh man, I hope Alan goes over central angle theorem again, because it's toast. Let me ask you, Jesse, just straight point blank. in the celestial sphere, and I transpose a star, right? Let's say the first point of Aries, for example,
I don't know what it means to transpose a star.
like to the ground. So it
I
actually
don't know what
represents
it means to transpose a star to the ground.
Okay, a ground position that links to a geographic position based off of the star's zenith. So whatever star you want to pick, doesn't matter. You with me so far?
I do know what a GP is. It's that point where if you were standing there, you would see the star exactly straight overhead.
90 degrees of overhead, right. Right. All right. Now, would you agree that the entire way Stellarium operates and any other type of star mapping technology works, that they rely on known GPs?
I do not know that to be true, and so I could not agree to it.
How do you not? What?
I don't think what you're saying is true. I know it's not true for the moon and the sun and stuff in Stellarium.
Stars.
Other than the sun, naturally.
All right, try to focus, Jesse. Stars.
The sun is a star.
So, okay, so Stellarium does not represent.
This is another
globe?
tactic. Jesse, come on, man.
Hold on, wait. This is very important. So Stellarium doesn't represent the globe.
I believe it does.
Okay, so it represents the globe. Right? You believe it does? Okay. Now, if I have a GP of a star, right, and I'm on a globe, it's 90 degrees overhead, right? Earth's rotating at 15.4 degrees per hour, something like that, right? Or 15 degrees? What is it exactly?
I think it's 1504.
15.04 degrees every hour, right? So if I were to stand in that same spot, and 24 hours from now, it would be in the same spot again, correct?
Yes, essentially.
Relatively speaking, like pretty much. Maybe it's off by like 4 seconds or something, 5 seconds.
23 hours, 56 minutes.
Right. So based off of that, right, if we're going by the latitude and longitude of a certain observer, right, let's say someone is, let's say they're standing there and then in their star field, right, in terms of like what they're observing the stars at a certain point on latitude and longitude, wouldn't that, no matter where I am on that point on Earth, that star that had that 90-degree zenith at one point will eventually decline in terms of my angle. There'll be declination of that star as it moves away from me, regardless of your paradigm, whether you think the Earth is rotating and we're falling backwards and the star's moving, or whether the star's moving overhead. I could calculate the position of that star just by adding 15.04 degrees every hour and then seeing where that position is, right? So I only need one zenith. I just wanted to see if you agree with me here.
You only need one zenith?
Yes.
And
then you can calculate where that star is going to be anywhere on Earth because you have that reference point.
I assume you mean like one zenith at one particular time, because obviously it changes constantly.
Right, but the change is a constant as well, though.
Yeah. So if you have a functioning map of the Earth and you know where it is at one point, you can calculate where it'll be at any other time because you know the Earth's spinning at this rate and the stars are effectively fixed and that. Yeah.
Exactly right. So in that paradigm, and so we're in agreement that you only need a certain amount of stars and their known GP, right? In terms of like you've actually taken an angle measurement to the star, it's actually 90 degrees above you. Relatively speaking, you could calculate from there on every other position that's in that star map.
Along its circle, the circle that its GP follows?
Right, yeah, exactly, yeah. If you were to take that 90 and follow it.
Sure.
I just want to make sure we're all in agreement here.
I think what you're saying makes sense. Like if you know the celestial sphere around you and you know like sphere. Twice you've got
I got it.
If you got like the celestial sphere and you're just trying to figure out how to orient the Earth relative to it at a given timestamp, knowing one ground position of one star will let you confirm where the Earth is relative to that. In principle, it can be done. Probably overcomplicating it, but I think it ought to work.
I mean, I've even found articles that they have huge tabulations where the rest of the stars are going to be calculated from there on out in order to help with sailors who are who are navigating using the stars, that they would actually have these tables, these tabulations.
Oh yeah, that totally makes sense for like pre-modern when you don't have computers.
Right, no, exactly. But so they take that aspect, and here I'll post it right here. So I just want to make sure we're all in agreement before the presentation today. So it says right here, no doubt the ideal tables for any navigator with no fondness for mathematical calculations is one with no interpolation, but the maker or designers of short navigational tables soon encountered 3 independent variables in every spherical triangle solved, and allowing for combinations for each minute of arc from 0 degrees to 90 degrees. It was noted that the preparation of such tables would involve tabulating the solution of 90 to the power of 3 times 60 to the power of 3, or 157 billion separate spherical triangles, which, at the rate of 1,000 triangles computed a day, would take some 400,000 years to compute and complete. Tables of such a voluminous proportion being entirely out of the question, the Hydrographic Office was completely satisfied with obtaining values for 3 variables cut down to the nearest integral degree of latitude and each degree of hour angle, with an ingenious scheme utilizing for correcting for any odd minutes of declination. These numerous computed values were neatly tabulated and clearly printed in 9 flexible volumes containing belts of 10 degrees of latitude from the equator to the north or south poles, entitled Tables of Computed Altitudes and Azimuth. No, it's not AI, Jesse.
Oh, do you mind dropping the link to the source document?
Sure.
Thank
From
you.
1943. Now, I just want to make sure that we're all in agreement here when it comes to these star positions and how they're all calculated and tabulated, and that there is a certain correction that has to be involved in terms of to make it follow a sphere or radius of 3959.
That's not what it's saying it's correcting for. You're saying it's correcting for the fact that you want to get your position to, say, a minute of arc, but they only can write the tables down to an hour or like a degree of arc. So you've got to be able to interpolate between the degrees in order to figure out your position more detailed than a degree of arc, which is like 100 miles, right? 111 miles? Like 69 miles, 111 kilometers. That's the correction they're talking about, is for not being at exactly the degree lines. It's got nothing to do with correcting for spheres and whatnot.
Well, the thing is, what locks you into a specific angle would be the fact that the fictitious observer is at the center of Earth, right? Using like the haversine, etc., to calculate that arc, right? Like if I'm at a certain position, I'm where the observer is, actually is, right? And I have a star that I'm observing. Based off of the arc length from the observer to, let's say, where the observer cannot see the star anymore because it's going beyond the curve of the Earth, you could say that that arc length has a specific fixed amount of time to where the star would be viable for like to look at. Like it can't go past that certain arc length, because then you wouldn't be able to see it no matter what, flat or globe. Like it's going past the horizon.
Right.
You see what I'm saying when I say that? Okay.
I think so. Continue.
So then if we use a mountain as a differentiator between which timing would match up between planar geometry and spherical geometry, what is wrong with that method?
Well, I mean, that's a total non sequitur. Like, I don't even get. Like, I know where you're going is celestial theodolite, but like, I don't see why a mountain would be particularly useful in this context. Like,
Well, because it connects
differentiating factor is
the
that
conceptual model to an actual physical thing that we can actually go and tangibly verify the height of.
okay, but you can go and tangibly verify like which star is directly overhead. You can verify angles of the light coming in. You can verify all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, but no, those angles are fixed to a certain time, no matter what, because that's how
like-
the entire model is based off of.
Well, but okay, I mean, the model is predicting, like, you can go into a globe-based calculator and say, okay, where will this star's ground position be at this time? And it will give you accurate results for every star at every time.
Right, why?
because the globe's accurate.
No, because of the timing. The timing is fixed. It's locked in.
But
And
I mean,
basically,
there's no one who, okay, like for past observations, that would, in theory, be possible. Maybe some secret order of Freemasons has been writing down where every star was every night for the last 1,000 years. But if you want to go predict where it'll be in the future, nobody can have observed that. It has to be a prediction based on the model. And if the model gives good predictions, then it's a good model. Like, it's not just the predictions are, we threw some numbers at a wall, we had a monkey throw things at a dartboard. The predictions are based on a physical model. You can do the calculations. It's fairly easy to understand how it's coming all together. The math can be a little complicated in places, but it's just normal math.
That's a pragmatic fallacy.
But you did say that it's predictions, but we just agreed that it's all calculations based off of an empirical observation.
Well, that's how everything in the world is predicted. Like, you want to predict what will happen if you drive into a telephone pole. Well, you see someone else did that and it didn't go well for them, so you don't want to do that because you've seen the observation, you have an idea of what's involved, you don't want to do it again because it's a bad outcome. You know, everything in life is you look at what happens and then you make conclusions based on that.
Yeah, that's you just trying to make up stuff to try to actually sound like you know what you're talking about. No, you're wrong. That's a post-diction, not prediction.
No, a post-diction is that guy did that and that's what happened. A prediction is if I do something similar, then something similar will happen.
Yeah, but you just analogize it. You just analogize it by saying I'm going to throw somebody driving into a tree or post or whatever.
Yeah, it doesn't matter.
Okay, so
watching what happened afterwards.
So your prediction, the quote-unquote prediction, though, right? It's not really a prediction. It's just a calculation because no matter what, the stars are going to decline angularly, right, in your field of view, regardless of model.
It's not no matter what.
15.4 degrees per hour. That's locked in for everybody here on Earth. Everybody is locked into that.
That is how it works in practice. Although, keep in mind, though, that isn't exactly it. If it goes from zenith straight down to the horizon, it's that. But if it's, curving along, like, if it peaks at 45 degrees up, say you're not directly under its path, then it won't be going down at 15 degrees an hour. It's more complicated.
Well, the true position of it will.
Yeah, I mean, you can make it the way that works. But anyway, my point being, though, everything in life, everything you ever do, every prediction that's made is based off of past observations. You use those to calibrate your model. You use those to figure out what you're trying to calculate. If I say, tell me how far the baseball I'm throwing is going to go, you're going to ask me, well, how hard are you throwing it? Where are you throwing it? What angle? You need that data. But you can use the fact that previous baseball has been thrown and measured and figure out the calculations from there. Like, you use the observations to tell you what to calculate, and you use the calculations to make predictions. If the predictions are good, then your calculations are good.
So that's exactly what it is when it comes to, the celestial sphere model, the conceptual model. You're basically having the celestial sphere and the terrestrial sphere, right? Terrestrial sphere meaning how much actual distance that someone is traversing on the ground in relation to the celestial sphere, the stars, because that's our ultimate reference point. So when you think about it, using this, it's pretty ingenious the way they've basically combined the two based off of star positions. But in terms of the actual shape of the Earth, right? When we start using stars that are close to the horizon, right? This is when the celestial refraction has to be incorporated in order to keep the model consistent, right? Internally consistent. Celestial refraction had to be introduced. It's not a question of if, it had to, in order to keep the time consistency, with itself, like to keep it in time,
but,
right?
Light does refract, we know that. So introducing some calculations for refraction makes a lot of sense to me.
Yep. FE requires that as well. And now we can skip the stars at the horizon and just do zeniths, charting zeniths all over the world simultaneously. We can start there.
I was just going to say that no one's saying that there isn't refraction.
Yeah, okay. But if there is refraction, then calculating refraction adjustments is the right thing to do. If it's a real thing, you want to calculate it.
The thing is, you can't calculate it unless you have an empirical observation ahead of time, right? If I see a star at 2...
No, that's not true. You need to know weather data in order to calculate it, but you don't need to know exactly where that star appeared.
Celestial refraction, dude. What do you mean?
We can...
I'm not as up to date on that, but my understanding is like it's
not
just
terrestrial, celestial refraction.
No, I get that. I believe it's the same principle where, like, if you know what the atmosphere is doing, like with weather balloons and
it's not
weather posts and all that, then you can calculate it. It's like you can do it from first principles. It's just density gradient is what matters. So as long as you know the density gradient of the air on the path, and you can calculate the refraction.
You don't, but that's not it. That's not how they calculate celestial refraction, brother.
Well,
It's literally just a curve fit formula.
But okay. Do you want? I guess the question is: do you want something hyper accurate that takes a lot of effort to calculate? Usually, that's not worth the effort. So you use the simple model, which is what's the average long term, and it'll probably be something close to that because it doesn't vary over such a wide range in the grand scheme of things. If it varies plus or minus a minute of arc, it's not. For most things, it's not that relevant.
Difference is the conception whether the stars go above your head and continually stay above your head and then move out of your field of view versus they're beneath my feet. So I think it does have some importance.
I mean, like, if you've got a different model that you think gives better data, then I'd love to see it, but nobody ever seems to produce it.
So this celestial refraction, did I just hear someone imply that that's reverse engineered? Like it
100% it is.
Is that what you guys just basically, did I hear you concede something to that effect? Because the model works, it must be right.
Yeah.
I mean, sorry, were you asking, which side were you asking that?
I actually don't know your handle name.
Sorry, I almost said it is. Yeah, the short version is like, the theory we have gives a good reason for it. And I know Alan's going to come on in a minute, so I'll try to be quick. The theory we have gives a good reason for why it ought to exist. The calculations can give predictions, but we also can do empirical. It's usually around this range to keep our life simple, unless you need something hyper accurate, just use this median number and leave it there. So you can retrofit it with empirical data, but there's different ways to do it.
I want to get my head around this just quickly. Celestial refraction, is it from a certain height up? Is it only in regards to stars, or do you use it for satellites as well? I just want to know what this limit is, where it starts. Presumably, it ends at the end of a visual field or something.
Basically, anything outside the atmosphere is at least the globe version of it. I don't know what the flats one does.
Gotcha. Okay, so not planes, like stuff above planes at that point.
More or less. That's my understanding, at least. Yeah, I'm not an astronomer, but that's my.
Well, either way, we're about to have the presentation pretty soon. I just kind of wanted to see if Globers were up to date. I can't believe Jesse said no, that the stellarium does not represent the GPs. That's pretty wild, dude.
Yeah, did he actually say that?
Puts like three-dimensional positions and then calculates where the Earth is and coordinates to. It's open source. You can go read the source code and see what exactly it does. I haven't done that.
But it links GPs and the right ascension declination in the sky down to lat long on the ground.
Yep, with your local hour angle and everything. Like it's locked in. The system is completely locked in. If you change any variable, it's going to change everything else along with it, which is why these observations of cells being occluded by mountain peaks are so damning to this model, because at a certain point in the sky, there has to be a certain amount of celestial refraction to bring up the star in order for it to be apparently, to be viewed from its apparent angle. But when we're talking about the true position, man, if you're talking about the true position and you can find an inconsistency in the true position of the star, then the whole thing falls apart, and you're basically just having faith that what your conceptual model is representing is actually reality.
You're not
we can focus with the zenith position of the stars directly above X number of observers over the Earth. We can start there before we talk about refraction.
Well, I mean,
and then get the Gleason FE set up. Have Alan get the Gleason FE set up, and chart an X number of stars over an X number of observers over the Earth. The globe has a celestial sphere. They've got the globe in the middle, and then a celestial sphere outside, and their model has zenith points of stars matching all observers all over the world. What we're talking about is one step forward, is at the horizon post refraction, when the competing model doesn't even have step one squared away yet.
Really
we should figure out what is this Gleason FE setup? Where are the stars charted?
What's your infatuation with Gleason?
No one's bringing up Gleason, dude.
Pick any flat Earth map you want.
Well, why are we just having one-sided anti-globe? Shouldn't we also be factoring in this possible truth as well?
Here's the kicker, Gatebreaker. Here's the kicker. What you just described, right? The Earth in the middle of the celestial sphere, right? The angles that are produced from that conceptual model use a fictitious observer in the center of the Earth. You understand that, right?
We're talking about an observer standing outside the ball, all over the Earth.
They don't. That's not how they see it.
With stars. Hey, Rob, I'm not talking to you, Hive Mind. Go on mute.
Yeah, you
Hive Mind, I'm not talking to you. I'm talking to Beast. Go on mute.
Yeah, hold on for a second. All right, so there's two different gatebreaker. The point you're bringing up is something different, having to do with GPs and whether there's like one or two poles in the Gleason's map and all. It's kind of a separate point. But yeah, Beast, what were you
basically
saying?
just trying to illustrate the point, though, that if you treat the fictitious observer at the center of the Earth, that's your fictitious observer. That's where you're getting all of your angles from in order to correspond with the two-sphere model, right? The celestial sphere and Earth being a sphere. That's how they're able to rationalize it.
Is that
right?
I need clarification? Clarification. Then you say he's considering a fictitious observer at the center of the Earth. Where does that come from?
That comes from your model.
Can you point that out?
Yes.
It's two poles at the center of the Earth, and you've got an infinite distance to the stars. Yeah. So all those GPs basically wrap around, and in order to wrap them, you have to essentially assume a central point of observation.
So if you're talking about a GP, how is that in relation to the center of the Earth?
That's a good question.
It's that the celestial sphere in the globe model is considered from one point going out and making an entire sphere of stars. That one point is treated as the center of the Earth because the difference between being at like a 4,000 mile radius versus the light years to stars are so inconsiderably different that they use it. The celestial sphere is the entire sphere from the center of the Earth point. And then when it's calculated for lastly, when it's calculated for a specific position on Earth, you're only going to see that section of it. But it's considered like the celestial sphere in the globe model starts at the center of the Earth and goes out and makes a whole sphere of light year stars.
Well, being a 0 point in a coordinate system is one thing, but the observer is on the surface of the sphere at a given radius, though, right?
Yeah.
See, okay, at a given radius. So then the center point of that triangle that you're forming, right, based off of the GP of the star, that 90, versus where you are in relation to the center of the Earth and the GP of that star, right, that gives you your angle in your model.
So that's not a fictitious observer at the center of the Earth, then?
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, I don't see it that way.
Left lane, do all the GPs in the globe model end up at one singular point at the center of the globe?
Yes.
Okay. There you go. That's what.
Yeah, but the observer is on the surface at a radius. That doesn't put the observer at the center. No.
Where do you think the 60 miles per degree comes from? It's all
the observer on the surface.
Yeah, but left lane, you've got the celestial sphere, big circle around the outside. Then you've got the Earth circle, right? The GPs. And then if you take the line from that star, put it through the GP, and then you basically just say that it's at the center, that's that fictional observer at the center. So you're drawing a line from that outside circle through the line at the Earth's GP point, and then it projects into the center of the Earth.
Yes, but to say the fictitious observer at the center doesn't mean anything to that. You've got to have the observer on the surface of the Earth. To say there's an observer at the center of the Earth does not make sense.
But you can wrap it around as the whole thing, like between dual pole AE and globe. It just sort of depends on where you put that fictitious observer.
Yeah. For example, left lane. Let me give you an example. Let's use Pikes Peak and Aquarius 39 or whatever. So when you observe that star at a certain time, it's at 2 degrees 31 arc minutes, right? That means in relation to its zenith, completely opposite to where it is, right, would be 87, whatever. It'd be 87 degrees. So basically, it's 2 degrees 31 arc minutes according to you, where you're at in your location, in relation to where its GP initially started, right? But how are you going to make that triangle if you can't see the GP? So that's why they use the center point at the center of Earth with a radius of 3959 to get that relationship of 60 nautical miles per degree, and it's locked in. That's how the whole thing works.
Also, should we clear the floor for Alan?
He's charging his
he's
headset.
He's going to be a couple minutes. So we're going to start.
60 nautical miles per degree is just the circumference of the Earth in nautical miles divided by 360 degrees.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I got a question. Anybody know? Yeah. The ECI and the ECEF, is it? Are those both tied to the center as well, or is it one and the other, or both? Both?
I think it is the center as well.
The center of the Earth, they all have the same z-axis alignment. Sorry, I'm just putting my phone to charge, or my headset to charge.
Couldn't remember if it was one or the other, or both, but it's both. Okay.
Yeah, it's basically anything.
Okay. It doesn't make you a bad girl when you have a fictitious observer, does it? In theory, a fictitious observer is used quite
No,
often.
but it does remove mutual exclusivity because it's just a conceptual model at that point, right? Because like Beast was laying out, you take the linear portion when the star moves from zenith to as it moves down angle horizon for you. When it stops following the 15 degree per hour relationship, there's a refraction correction that's introduced in that, and at every in every 10 degree angular band all the way down to 0, there's a refraction coefficient that is applied. Now they say that it's calculated based on air density and temperature and yada yada, but it ends up being the exact amount that they always need to maintain usefulness to the true position of the star, which they started with to make the coordinate system useful for a ground position relative to that fictitious observer that they used to find that 15 degree per hour angular drop rate.
Okay.
So,
yeah.
Yeah, and it's literally binded. It's literally binded. So there needs to be a declination in terms of the star, because if I was on a ball Earth and Earth is rotating at that same rate, then there should be a certain spot where you're not going to be able to see the star any longer because it's being blocked by Earth's curvature, no matter how much celestial refraction is incorporated.
that's actually a really key point, because we have an occlusion where the true position relative to the observer is said to be 11 arc minutes below the geometric horizon as well. And then we'll cover that later tonight.
Exactly. So wild. You can't get out of it. You can't escape it. Only thing you can do is say the method is shit, as Ruhif has quoted. Your method is rubbish. Sorry, I don't know how to do your voice, Ruhif. I tried.
You got to say, that's not a knife. This is a knife.
So you guys, it looks like I don't know if you guys have heard this yet, but Cyrus yesterday was going through it all, and he actually got his camera all set up. He has 169 kilometer occlusion in Arizona.
Ooh.
That he's looking to get. Yeah.
Send me the pictures of it. It looks so good. I can't wait.
Oh, nice. He sent them. Yeah, he sent them to me too. Dude, doesn't that look so good? Yeah, he's got I think it's a DSLR that he's using.
Yeah, it's gonna look clean.
Basically, this is essentially what I'm talking about, left lane. If you can see the picture.
I guess we don't know exactly what distance he'll get yet, because I think from his one location, he's like 145 kilometers, and then his other one is like 169. If he were to go up on this other mountain, Alan, does that become an issue? Like if you're up at the angle becomes very acute.
Nope, it's all good. Mike even did one that was from a higher elevation, and the mountain was at a lower elevation. All it does is just make the angle mathematically negative. It's not an issue at all.
Yeah, because if you think about the different, yeah, because the height, if you think about it in relation to how many meters, you're talking about, what is it, Alan? Something like 93 million meters or something versus like a height difference of the mountain of 2,000. Like it would be so negligible in terms of the angle.
I don't know what you're saying, but it's fine either way.
Even if it was if you're at the same height though, even if you're at the same height, same altitude, where the occlusion is happening, like let's say you're on a 7,000 foot mountain and there's another mountain that's 7,000 foot mountain.
That would be really interesting. I don't know what would happen there, but that would do it. If that's possible, do it. That'd be awesome.
Yeah.
We'll figure out something.
By the way, GL, check it out. See that picture I just posted?
I gotta get over to the chat. When did you post it?
Main chat. 5:10. So 10 minutes after the hour.
Essential celestial navigation.
Right. Do you see what it says in green?
Okay, I pulled it up here now. All right, I have it up on the live stream too. So yeah, go ahead if you want to. I pulled it up, and it's on the live stream right now too. I just zoomed into it.
Okay. Yeah. So essentially, what we measure is what we can actually see on the surface of the Earth. The observed altitude, the horizon. So that's like the dip correction. Then you have atmospheric refraction, yada yada, and then how we find what we want, where you have the horizontal versus the true altitude. And then it says what we already know, and it has a green line from the center of the Earth all the way to the celestial body. That's what locks in that angle that you are observing on the surface. So that's an arc length right there. From the observer to the horizon, then from the center of the Earth to the celestial body, and that's what forms your triangle. It just so happens to coincidentally, you know, that at the end of the arc, there's a mountain peak that occludes the star every single time. That's the craziest part about it. At the end of the arc length.
Yeah, left lane before you were asking about how the center of the Earth. Are you seeing this image? This is a really good image to show.
Yeah, I was taking care of some business, but I just jumped back on. So I missed probably most of that.
It's at 10 minutes after. If you look at that, yeah, or if you want to post it again, it's at 10 minutes after. I'm just saying it answers exactly what you were bringing up before. So.
So when it says the ephemeris position of celestial body, that's the true position. See how it's 90 degrees? So all the stars used in celestial navigation are based off of where they were at a certain point in time in terms of the zenith comparatively to where they were, you know, in any other point in time. It's all going to be referencing back to that first point in Aries. I mean,
but what I see there, I see that, you know, the apex of those, like the observer's position and the GP of the star intersects at the center. That's the geometry of it. But saying there's a fictitious observer at the center of the Earth does not compute in that with regard to, it's like, I don't know, it doesn't make sense that you're saying there's an observer at the center of the Earth.
Well, we can't actually observe where the star is comparatively to its zenith. We're assuming that its zenith is there every time. Anytime we take an angle measurement to a star, we're assuming the true position of that star was at a certain point in time at a certain spot in the sky, period.
But you can go on Stellarium and look and see what stars are at your zenith at any given time, and it's accurate for all observers of the Earth. It's not like this isn't
Dr.
well
Mike,
established.
welcome back, my good sir. How are
It
you?
sounds like the headset is charged.
I'm good.
Yeah, Alan, I'll do everything server side. I'm getting the event going, and then I'll send out. But yeah.
Okay, cool. I'm gonna roll my intro, and then we'll get into it. Be right back. Beast, you're
Good to
doing
see
a
you,
great
Dr.
job.
Mike. I'm trying my best, but like I when we went through it the other day, I was like, oh my goodness, I see now. And Dr. Mike had this down pat like in January, but didn't know how to really like lay it out. Took a whole year almost to like really come to understanding that you already had Dr. Mike. It's so funny.
And anymore, I haven't seen him in a couple of weeks.
Yeah, my since I was last here, my ranch in Colorado is up for sale, and I'm currently in Arizona house sitting for my daughter while she's out of town. So I'm on a new Wi-Fi, a new server. I lost my noise canceling microphone. I've got to find it, so that's why you hear the dog barking. But it's good to be back.
Oh, there you are. Okay, good deal.
I think Alan's still running the intro. Dr. Mike, is there anything real quick that you can reference for central angle theorem or theory that might be a little quick like refresher for people, including myself?
There's a lot of good stuff on central angle, and I don't have easy access to it, but I published one in one of the papers, and that's probably the best one because it's interactive and unless you play with it.
Oh, you posted an EtherCause?
All right, hello and welcome everyone to Celestial Theodolite update number 30. Today we're going to go over a little bit of central angle theorem, and then we'll touch on virtual images at the end as a follow-up to last week's conversation. So, as Beast was just laying out earlier before we came on, there's a geocentric position that is referenced for the positions of stars to relate them to a ground position, and this is done by tying the 60 nautical mile per degree relationship to a 15 degree per hour angular descent. Now, if those two things are true, then that star's ground position referenced on the first point of Aries at a zenith will then also be true as you calculate it out throughout the any time after that. So with that, but there's a certain angular band in which that linear relationship holds true, and it's about when the star is at 30 to 70 degrees or so. It seems to follow the 15 degree per hour relationship really well with the position that we do see. But as the star gets lower in the horizon, they start to have to introduce atmospheric refraction corrections that are a specific amount that tie it to the 15 degree per hour position, so that no matter where you see that star apparently, it'll be tied to that ground position at the 15 degree per hour rate. So that's how they link it all together. And I have a citation here from the Nautical Almanac, or from the explanatory supplement to the Astronomical Ephemeris and the American Ephemeris and the Nautical Almanac. So basically, a bunch of people were asking, "Hey, how do you come up with these corrections and stuff that you put out for the almanacs and every year and whatnot?" So the British Crown put out this book to, tell the tale of how they how they use the ellipsoid model in these geocentric positions to calculate everything, to verify their positions. And then they give a reference for how astronomic refraction is handled. So I went through these citations here, and in another Prezi that I did, I went over some of the citations and what they do. And all these are their expansion series where they're integrating data and observations into what it needs to be to maintain the 15 degree per hour relationship. Because as they get really low in the horizon, like, sub 10 degrees, sub 5 degrees, etc., they start to really not follow the 15 degree per hour relationship. So that's where they start to introduce specific amounts of refraction. So like when you're looking at this example here, North Peak in Colorado, which is 2,000 feet above sea level, there's a 23 arc-minute astronomic refraction correction, and that's because the star's true position, the one that's following the 15 degrees per hour, is geometrically below the peak. But they're saying that it's refracted up by 12 arc minutes and then another 12 arc minutes to put it at its apparent position for the observer there. So whatever refraction amount has to be for you to see the star, that's how much is going to be calculated at the time, and that all comes out of these formulaic computation things that are based on assuming multiple basically they model out a static homogeneous gradient assuming Earth's radius, and then they build it outwards from there so that it's all symmetrical and bends light such that it'll always be exactly to maintain the 60 nautical mile per degree relationship. So that's how all of that is referenced. But what Beast was touching on was something that I noticed last week when I was going through it. Let's start with Pikes Peak before we go anywhere else, because that's the familiar territory, to make sure everything is calibrated correctly. So let's see. We're going to cover central angle really quick. So this is what central angle looks like if we have an observer here and we have some distance away here defined by the coordinate system. This is what it would look like. So the distance between them would be an angular measurement, and you can transfer that into a distance by multiplying that angular amount by the distance. So we have that here in the spreadsheet. So in this case, there's 27 arc minutes between the observer Mike and the mountain peak. Now on both models, there's a mountain peak at the end of that arc length, and there's a rise over run to that peak that we're calculating, using the internally consistent system. So in terms of distance and elevation of mountain with respect to sea level, etc., we're taking that for what it is. One second, just getting some water. And then on the globe model, there's going to be a slightly smaller mountain because of drop over distance of that arc length. And if you see here, there's a mathematical relationship between gamma, which whenever you hear gamma in this context, it represents the central angle. So gamma in this case would be 27. There's a half gamma, and that half gamma represents the drop over distance of that arc length. So there's that proportional ratio there, and you can use a basic trig function to convert it from an angular amount to a meters amount, just a tangent function, because you already have the angle and you already have the distance. So you can tangent that out to get what it would be in meters. And in this case, it comes out to be 200 meters.
So
you just, go ahead.
I'll go back to that. I just kind of want to like lay it out for people. Okay, so gamma is the entire angle in terms of the arc length. So 27 arc minutes. That's gamma.
Yep. And that
Okay.
also represents the amount of celestial drop. So when Mike was calling it celestial drop, and that's actually what it's labeled in the spreadsheet, well, when the fictitious observer is referenced to describe the angular descent of a star to maintain the 15 degree per hour, 60 nautical mile per degree relationship, this gamma amount would be, so like as the star moves and, angularly descends in time, it's also traversing the surface of Earth. So as it traverses that arc length, it's also dropping. by that amount. And then because they related to 15 degrees per hour, based on that true position to give the usefulness of the geographic position, which is the ground position, as we call it, we know how long it'll take for it to angularly descend that much. So
right, and that's between, and so when you see the two, like see the surface of Earth, if you point to where the observer is on the circle, right there. So from there, that's where the observer is, and then the mountain peak is at the end of that. Boom, that is gamma. So no matter what, that star is going to decline in terms of an angle, which is gamma, and then that corresponds to a time. No matter what, boom, that's all. Those are all locked in.
Yep, and someone's hot
So to
micing a
speak.
little bit, or echoing.
That
you
sounds
or
like an
something.
echo. Yeah.
Yeah. Right. So yeah, we have our predicted amounts based on the internally consistent model, and by our internally consistent model, of course, I mean the two-sphere model, the celestial and terrestrial sphere, where they have to be merged together by this transformation to the center here to establish the ground position nautical mile per degree relationship. Let's see here.
Maintain its ratio is what you're saying, right?
Yeah. So anyway, based off of the rise over run to the peak and using their 15 degree per hour angular descent coordinate system, we predict that the occlusion time for Pike's Peak will be 1843.18. Now the globe, following their geometric intersection for their observer-based position, they should predict the peak and the star true position lines up at 1842.04. And we covered that last week as well, and we're all in agreement. Now, people say that the reason that they don't include is because of astronomical refraction, which we'll get to in a minute. But let's continue here. But in every measurement, you'll notice that flat Earth is off on their prediction, even though we're always closer in the intersection angle. Now, when we derive an elevation based off of the occlusion angle, of which is where the star's purported true position is with respect to the peak at the time of occlusion, following the 15 degree per hour angular descent rate, we get this triangle, and in this case, it's 30 meters off, so it's reasonably close. You don't have any reason to suspect that, like, oh, what's wrong here or whatever. But as we continue on, we notice that every single measurement is like that, and the common factor here is that, and even when we go to star emergences like Old Blend and Houndstooth, they follow the same situation where the central angle relationship distance, in terms of distance angle-wise, has to be traversed relative to the observer before the star becomes visible or gets occluded. So my hypothesis is that the true position of the star doesn't angularly descend at 15 degrees per hour relative to the observer. It actually goes at a different rate, and that's why it doesn't occlude until it's angularly aligned with the mountain peak, because it's still following the 15 degree per hour relationship. It's just lingering for us. But there would be no way to ever know this in either model, because it's based off of the apparent position and the usefulness of the ground position. So everyone agrees that if you use the coordinate system, that it's going to be accurate and relate a position of a star to the ground and all of that based off of a true position. And we're all assuming that the true position angularly descends at that rate. But on a flat Earth, it's you're not going to have the true position actually angularly descending like that. It's going to linger. So I think that's the difference in all of these measurements. That's why it's off, because when you reference the end of that central arc length relative to the observer, hold on one second, it occludes, at the end of the arc length, but it's always the 15 degree per hour angular descent reference that we're making is what ends up being off. And what's really interesting about that is that in every single measurement, the amount that we're off by, the intersection difference, if you add them to what the globe was off by, you get the full central angle amount. I'm sorry, not the full central. You get the half gamma amount, which is proportional to
drop over distance.
which is which is the drop over distance, but it's also proportional to the full central angle. So
wild.
So I think like like our premise of occlusions being physical intersection based is sound, because when this physical intersection actually occurs relative to the observer, it gets occluded because there's nothing there at the end of that arc length other than a mountain. And one model had an earlier time to get theirs, one has a later time, and it ends up being a little earlier than what the later time is predicted. And I think that's due to the relation, like just the conceptual model of how the star is said to be following 15 degrees per hour isn't true. So that's my new position on that. And when we go through all the mountain peaks here, so we'll just run through these real quick. We got Blodgett Peak, 5 degrees off in position, which is going to affect the triangle because it's based off of the where it should be at that time. But it was 27 seconds, real seconds early. But again, at the end of the arc length, and over here, over here I have the arc length difference of at the time of occlusion to make sure that it matches up. Now, using that time by itself would kind of be like self-referential because we already have the time of occlusion, but the difference in our predictions is proportional to what the drop over distance should have been. So basically like that should be reversed if the Earth was a globe. That's how much flat Earth should be off, like these numbers wise.
It literally should be reversed.
It would create the exact mathematical opposite. And then so let's see, where was we? Oh yeah, okay. So we go to Cheyenne.
All right, so let me see if I can steel man this. So what you're saying is the flat Earth prediction is off by the exact amount that the globe Earth predicts drop over distance based off of the 15 degrees per hour declination.
We're off by a little bit of what it is, and the globe is off by the majority of the other part of it. So the total of us makes up whatever the drop over distance is.
When you add them together.
So like in this case, if you take our intersection difference, subtract it from their intersection difference, you get 11.
And that's literally the half gamma every time.
Negative. But yeah, when it comes out negative or whatever, you add it, and then when it's positive, you subtract them, and it always comes out to be gamma.
The only difference between the model is the Earth curve. The distance, or the difference in prediction, should always be proportional to the drop, right? Like, is there any other factors?
Say that again.
I'm just saying because correct me if I'm wrong, the only difference between the two models, flat and globe, is the drop over distance. So the difference between the two predictions should always be equal to the impact of that drop over distance, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so that'll always be the difference between the two, just by definition.
Yeah, and that's what I use to verify the consistency of what we're doing in the spreadsheet and everything, because that's exactly right.
Makes sense. Okay.
So
which
yeah, when
implies
we say that, so that when we say that it should be reversed, because if the Earth were a globe, then it would be the opposite. So for the measurements for flat Earth. So as we continue here, we have 3 arc seconds off on this one. Globe was off by 17. And then another thing I want to note is earlier I talked about how they go over astronomical refraction and how it's formulaic out of all these papers that I referenced from the Nautical Almanac thing. What they end up saying is that they would like to do experiments to verify the validity of whatever, but that's just what it computationally comes out to be. And with that, I want you to note that the central angle from observer to peak, how much astronomical refraction there is over that arc length, and then specifically how on a globe, when we're looking at drop over distance relative to some arc length, how that refraction amount is like saying, okay, the star is supposed to angularly descend by this amount at this time, but because of refraction, it's actually being lifted up by half of the drop over distance of whatever arc length you're working with. In almost every case, the amount of astronomical refraction exceeds the drop over distance for the arc length and in some cases it even exceeds the central angle, which is to say that
Insane.
there's no, which is like literally implying that there's no drop over distance. So we'll continue on to Mount Rosa, and I'll point those out as we
No,
continue. But
Is
yeah,
the
go ahead.
astronomical refraction is for the star, not the mountain. So, like,
Correct,
it may.
but correct, but it is relative to that arc length that we're looking at. So in terms of how much lift it's going to apply over distance, it's directly translatable to that in terms because we have a defined arc length to it.
I guess you asked the two.
So
Okay.
Which
yeah,
is
so
why
like
the globe should have their star occlusions, at an earlier time.
like what we get that too, but what we can do because of that ratio where we have a defined arc length now, we can actually look at it in terms of lift. So you can convert the angular amount into meters over that distance. So over that distance, they predict 178 meters of drop for curvature, but they give 215 meters of lift for the star. So that's the kind of timing / angular relationship that is just being regularly put out at these angles. And like I said, it's just mathematically computated to be what it has to be to maintain usefulness to the true position, regardless of whatever conditions actually exist.
Hence locked in.
Let's see. And then we have Green Mountain here, where we were 1 arc minute off. Globe was 15 arc minutes off. The refraction amount here is exceeds the drop over distance amount again. And it's not quite the full central angle, but it's pretty much all of it. Let's see here. Yeah, again, I just want to reiterate, at the end of this on both models is a mountain. We all agree. The only thing that's kind of in contention at this point is the angular descent of the stars, because that would be the only thing that would produce this difference. Otherwise, we'd have to argue that the elevations or sea level or something was off, and we're taking that as is for the internal consistency and whatnot. I don't think that the mountain is higher than the whatnot, but because we're referencing where the star should be in the coordinate system at the time of occlusion, that produces a different ratio for the triangle, because we're only starting with 2 of the components, and one of them, or well, we're only starting with one of the known variables, and the other component comes from the occlusion position. So North Peak here. Now this is one where it gets really bad for the globe, because here they say that the star is geometrically occluded by Earth curvature, but it's being lifted up by 23 arc minutes, 12 to lift it up over the ball, 12 to put it in visible range for the observer here. And it gets occluded at the end of this arc length, which is 1 degree and 10 arc minutes. This is the longest distance one we've had, which is the largest discrepancy, or one of the largest discrepancies for the angular descent position, because that's what's going to dictate that, at the time of occlusion, where that physical light source intersected the mountain peak, because that's like if it's 14 arc seconds, like it had to. This is why it occluded early, because it's not following that angular descent rate. There's nothing else, because there's a mountain there, and there's a star's true position that's supposed to be in this spot. So the fact that it happens early at the end of that arc length, I mean, it seems to me it's pretty straightforward, but I can understand if people aren't going to agree to that or whatever. But that is my current interpretation.
I see what you're saying,
of that.
though. I see what you're saying. So basically, the fact that it occludes earlier shows that the star is not actually declining or declining as if it was going beneath your feet in a sense, because Earth rotation, that's why the stars are moving, etc. So therefore, it would have to decline if we were on a ball. The simple fact that it got occluded earlier means that the star is still above head, just farther away, essentially.
Yeah, because they already were under the ball, and then it gets occluded with like 2 arc minutes over what they would geometrically predict. So it doesn't even make sense on a globe.
No shit.
Well, I mean, 2 minutes still. We went into this last week. I don't need to go too deep, but 2 minutes is a lot less than 14.
No, but you don't understand. It's 2 minutes of a refraction amount that can't be ended early. There has to be that much refraction to make the GP useful in the model. And if there is that much refraction, then it can't occlude 2 arc minutes in difference. It's like that was the whole point of going over that because these amounts are saying that they're geometrically over the peak for the globe at the time. So how would that cause an occlusion if there was no mountain there and the star was 11 arc minutes under the globe, you know, and it's still visible by 12 arc minutes? There's you would as much refraction as was needed to explain the observation is how much you would say is there. But in this case, there's a mountain, and that refraction amount has to always be cut short in every single scenario to match the occlusion time, which is the rise over run to the peak, but just not following the model's 15 degree per hour angular descent relative to the fictitious observer.
Okay, but use the same standards for the flat prediction.
We are. That's why we derive triangles. That's why we derive triangles. We're looking at the difference in the elevation of the star relative to the observer between conceptual model and reality.
Yeah.
Because there's nothing else here to occlude this other than a true position of a star where it's out of position. It's not, the globe lads wouldn't say that it's out of position by 14 arc minutes or 21 arc minutes. They know exactly, where the star is at. So the only within that coordinate system. So the only alternative is that the star's angular descent isn't following that, and it's
just a concept.
Yeah, it's just following the
experiments
conceptual
that
model.
are weird atmospheric conditions that day. Like there's other things it could be. But anyway, sorry, I meant to not interrupt you too much this week. I'll shut up for a little while.
You're good.
20 minutes.
You're good. But in terms of experimental error, keep in mind that in every measurement, the arc length is the exact amount that corresponds to the time of occlusion, which corresponds to the proportional difference to half gamma, which is proportional to gamma. A lot of proportionals going on, but extremely significant. Let me see if I can pull up this diagram that Brian made of the difference between the conceptual model and what's measured. He plotted it out on a nice graph. See if I can find it. Oh, here it is, I think. Okay. So at these angles of occlusion or emergence, we can see here the dotted or the solid blue line is the perfect celestial sphere following the 15 degree per hour, 60 nautical mile per degree angular descent relationship. And
So
then
solid
at
blue
the
is
time,
basically globe but no refraction.
yes, correct. It's the celestial sphere model. And so like where these stars' true positions should be relative to their time of occlusion. And then here's where they're getting occluded at. So you can see that they're lingering beyond what the celestial sphere predicts in terms of true position descent, which is really interesting because, like I said, just using observation of the star alone, you would never know that this is going on because you're just referencing the true position. And just doing that, they have a correction here for you to reference the angular separation between this and the celestial sphere to link it back to give it usefulness for the ground position. So yeah, that's
You should reiterate that. That's key. The simple fact is celestial refraction is incorporated in order to keep the usefulness of those stars' GPs. In terms of like celestial navigation, etc. It has to be in there.
And like I said, I'm not saying that there's not refraction or something like that. But what I am saying is that for the coordinate system to maintain usefulness to that geocentric position that they start with, any optical apparent position that you reference has to be refracted from that true position by a specific amount to complete the symmetry of the coordinate system.
Depending on the observer height, above sea level, and the angle of the star, right?
Just the angle to the star, wherever the.
Well, and your height though too. Like if you're at a lower sea level, like if you're at somewhere closer to sea level, you're gonna have way more celestial refraction being calculated in there, right?
That's what they say, but it ended up. I think it's just because you can see the stars before they, should on their model. So they just say that, this due to this much extra refraction or whatever, because like theoretically it would have to be, right? But if they're not following that 15 degree per hour ascent or descent rate, then it would just be the star is, coming into your field of view and, you're now able to perceive the light from it based off of its true position. relative to you, which is angularly lower, but the apparent position ends up being visible before they predict. Okay, so when we keep going here, so anyway, I just wanted to show here that the amount of refraction this yielded, the amount of refraction failed to compensate by 435 meters of that mountain peak that it was supposed to be lifting up over, which is a huge geometric failure. And then Getaway Mountain here, we have 7 arc minute difference, globe off by 20. The full arc length was traversed when we referenced that. And let's see, the refraction, really interesting. 3 arc minutes off of the full central angle, and almost twice as much as the drop over distance. And then over here we got Houndstooth. So Houndstooth was an emergence, and we predicted that the star would emerge a little later than it did, following the 15 degree per hour angular ascent. But it ended up emerging when it was 3 degrees in difference of that 15 degree per hour position relative to the rise over run of the peak. But again, referencing the central angles and the difference in air, it ends up, showing that the star wasn't following the 15 degree per hour relationship at the time of emergence, even at 10 degrees above the horizon there. The amount of astronomic refraction was overprescribed, so they prescribed 4, and there was 5 degrees of separation in the emergence. Or no, where was it? It was 4 degrees of astronomic refraction to 4 degrees of the central angle. Yeah, it was just,
That's so crazy.
So it was just like basically trying to maintain a 1-to-1 relationship to that 60 nautical mile per degree.
Stay there real quick. Say that. I just want people to understand this. The refraction amount is almost equal to the arc length, which means that there really is no drop over distance.
I mean,
yeah,
the refracted globe prediction and the flat prediction are very similar in most of these, so it does make sense. The refraction equals about the drop, because they're clearly mostly offsetting for the results to be that close. Different prediction matching up so easily as well.
And so like what that implies though is that the Earth would be flat, and then you guys are just using a secondary correction to maintain usefulness to a coordinate system at that binds all the stars' positions and angles at a specific time, relative to an angular drop rate that doesn't actually occur in reality. That would be the outcome of that
implication of it.
Because like I said, every angular band requires a specific amount of refraction, regardless of what was ever actually measured, so that its true position will be relevant to its ground position.
Like if we didn't have other data sets, like if Cel-Theo was the only way of measuring the shape of the Earth, like globe with refraction's a little closer than flat, but they are in the same ballpark.
Even considering refraction in both models, the occlusion happens at the exact time. I mean, at the exact time that the arc length is traversed, creating the full difference of that arc length for both.
Sorry, do you have a flat with refraction number somewhere? I didn't see that on there.
Yeah, we're doing geometric intersections. Even if you applied any amount of refraction, it would be all that would be saying is like, we're going to change the time to a different time.
Well, since you're measuring time, that seems important.
Yeah, and there's only one occlusion time, and that's
There's only one time,
and that's the one we're all sticking with.
Yeah,
the one occlusion time is what makes this meaningful in terms of determining what reality is showing us.
Not a single occlusion time matches the angular descent rate of 15 degrees per hour, and that's what the globe predicts, regardless of how these measurements are going or whatever. Like, they're not following that descent rate. That's the important part of this, and there would be no way to ever know that, but just by internally referencing where's the position of the star, and then referencing the geocentric position and all that, because that's what makes it internally consistent, to give it a relative agreed upon ground position for all the stars.
And I would have got away with it too if it wasn't for that dang Dr. Mike.
But the globe model doesn't. I mean, the globe model says that the descent rate pauses at the horizon anyway, right?
Not for the true positions, my good sir. And we're
All
getting
right, for the apparent
intersections that,
position.
yeah, and occlusions are a physical process between light source and physical object. So the true position is the reference light source. It's the source of the light that once was above someone's zenith that is moving at 15 degrees per hour, and the apparent position is always the angular deviation from that true position, and it's angularly deviated by the amount of astronomical refraction per whatever angle you're looking at it is.
So what you're saying is left lane, the apparent position lingering or whatever, you're saying, oh, well, that's expected because of refraction. Well, if you're using a mountain peak, right, as the differentiator between, plane trig, spherical trig, and you incorporate that same level of refraction because it's linked to a coefficient that's linked to a certain angle that's linked to the known GP of said star, right? It all has to be in conjunction with one another, but the occlusion timing shows otherwise. It shows that there is no angular descent of a star, right, which is necessary in order for you to say that the stars are actually beneath my feet right now.
Yeah, no angular descent rate that they predict anyway.
It's almost like the sky and the heavens are above.
So when you don't see
always.
the star, I don't think anyone would contest that, they no longer see it anymore. But mathematically, you can represent that as negative coordinates, and that could be, beneath your feet, or that could just be out of your field of view, but still above you, moving at that same 15 degree per hour rate, because we know that the star is going to return to thereabouts to that position the next night, 24 hours later. So moving on to Mount Blinn here, we have a rise over run to a peak of 1 degree 34 arc minutes. We have a drop over distance of 5 arc minutes here. So we have 1 degree 28 arc minutes for the glob peak there. And at the time of emergence here, there was an 18 arc minute intersection difference between the peak and the true position relative to the observer. For flat Earth, there was 12. But again, when we look at the arc length of this distance here, the star emerged 1 minute earlier than what flat Earth predicts for our angle, and it emerged 2 minutes later than what the globe would have predicted. And then with astronomical refraction accounting for that, if the true position has no relevance or anything like that, then the star would have already been visible 11 seconds ago because it already geometrically overcame the peak at that time. But that's not what occurred either. So again,
you're getting that
too,
from astronomical refraction being incorporated. In terms of like that's the apparent position, it should have been already visible. The apparent position.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah. And for the central angle fans out there, we got 12 arc minutes of central angle here, and we got 20 minutes of refraction. So like earlier when I was talking about, it's not following that descent rate, but it's still visible. This is like if there was no mountain there, they would be seeing this, like it is normally, and they would attribute the true position to being at 1 degree 9 arc minutes relative to the observer, when in fact it was more closer to 1 degree and 34 arc minutes relative to the observer for the true position. But the apparent position that you observe is 1 degree and 30 arc minutes. So it's coming into your field of view. So it hasn't angularly risen yet above the true position,
which is a problem because because refraction's supposed to lift things up, right? Because of that astronomical refraction of 20 arc minutes, right? You should have already been seeing that star emerge from the mountaintop.
We got the same situation at a further mountain peak, or a same peak, longer distance here. So the central angle this time is 22 arc minutes, doubled the distance there. And then in this regard, we're 14 arc minutes off. The globe is 15 arc minutes off. It's predicted that there's 130 meters of drop over distance based off of the intersection differences of the triangle that we derive from that. We end up being 173 meters. The globe, when you derive based off of the true position at the time of occlusion for the observer, their amount, the difference of 103 or 304 and 173 is 131.
It's almost
So
it is the same.
so again, relating that emergence to physically overcoming the rise over run to the peak, but just not at that angular descent rate, because the only thing that's at that intersection point on either side of the peak is an observer, and that's it. So then we got Goose's measurement here, Regulus at 4 degrees over a central angle of 8 arc minutes. It gets occluded early by 31 seconds. And again, I think that's due to the relationship of the true position not following the apparent position. And if refraction had any role in it, I think that the central angle difference would be present in that.
So another question: have y'all observed this lack of 15 degrees per hour, or is it just worked out in your spreadsheet?
It's inferred from the occlusion timings at the difference of the time of occlusion at an expected angular descent rate. When it happens earlier, the only explanation would be, like logically, would be that the predicted angular descent rate isn't following what it should be.
And it needs to in the ball conception. Because, the Earth's supposed to be rotating, and that's what's making the stars appear to, go out of our field of view because it's going beneath your feet.
So if I picked a star at my zenith at whatever time, early in the evening preferably, and then I tracked that star for 6 more hours until it disappeared, and I wouldn't get 15 degrees per hour?
So for the apparent position, as it gets lower to the horizon, it deviates from 15 degrees per hour. It actually starts deviating earlier than that, but you don't really notice it because it's a small amount. But as it gets lower, it starts deviating. So that's the apparent position you see is always the quote unquote astronomically refracted position. There's another position that's referenced that is following the 15 degree per hour relationship from when that star was once at your zenith, but that position you don't see. And that position is supposed to be angularly descending at the 15 degree per hour rate because it's supposed to be following the terrestrial sphere. That's what makes the stars angularly descend at that rate. That's how they make the celestial and terrestrial sphere work together, by making the radius the same, because the celestial sphere has an infinite radius, but the terrestrial sphere, they say, has a 3959 radius, and that's what causes that angular descent of the star. So when they look at the star from that true position and reference 15 degrees per hour to it, they're also adding 15 degrees per hour with an angular descent that corresponds to 60 nautical miles per degree.
Yeah, that's the key
for that position. And so what we're getting is when we're referencing where that position is at the time of occlusion, it ends up being off, but yet still an occlusion happened. And so if it's refracted, the globe predicts it would be above. Actually, it's pretty close in this one for astronomic. It's only 46 arc minutes. That's pretty, or arc seconds. Sorry, that's pretty close. But in all other cases, it's at least 1 arc minute plus for being geometrically over it. So they predict that there's not an occlusion at that time, and then for the geometric intersection for the light source, they already missed that. And then for flat Earth, it hasn't occurred yet. Following the 15 degree per hour rate, but it occurred anyway when it got to the end of that peak following 15 degrees per hour. So the same time interval, just different angular descent amounts. All right. Any questions or comments on that?
I want to hear from Dr. Mike. Are you available, Dr. Mike? I know you probably have some hustle and bustle going on.
I'm gonna go fill up my water. I'll be right back. You got a beast?
Yeah.
I just swung down my microphone. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
I think Alan did an amazing analysis of this, and I agree with everything he said.
Perfect. Is there so if you had to summarize in maybe like 2 or 3 sentences about the implications of what was discussed here, what would the implications be?
the implications are something that was theorized early on is that the appearance of a globe Earth exists only in refraction corrections. And when you look at real measurements, they don't agree with what globe Earth is predicting. And that's why the grand experiment of the Cel-Theo failed to refute the null hypothesis, because if the Earth were a globe, it should have been easy to refute that we weren't getting flat Earth measurements, and yet from the very beginning, we were getting flat Earth measurements. And then as we dug more and more into all the various objections coming from different directions, it became real apparent that the central angle is explaining what's going on, and that's when you take a globe Earth measurement and compare it to a flat Earth measurement of the same peak including the same star, it's always off by the central angle. When you're using, that's when you're comparing uncorrected measurements. But all our globe Earth friends do is add refraction to come up with what they believe the measurements to be. We've all figured out that the refraction measurements, as these spreadsheets show, are just all over the place and they don't agree. And but what is consistent on the measurement, whether it's made from the observer's location or the peak, is that the difference is always the central angle. And that can only be true. I think Alan stated it this way. That can only be true on a flat Earth. A globe Earth could not behave that way because the drop over distance expected from a globe Earth would mess up the measurement, but that's not happening.
Right.
We agreed before though that the only difference between the two models is the drop over distance, which is the central angle. So like it's not a surprise that is going to be the difference between the two, right?
Right, but it would be the difference on us being off by that amount, and you guys would be correct by that amount. So like the intersection difference here for us would be 11, and then for you guys it would be 2.
Yeah, it should be reversed.
And technically, it would even be 2. It would be 0 because it would be, if your model were true, then it would be following that 15 degree per hour descent rate exactly, and it would have occluded exactly when it hit the peak at 217 traverse on its way down to that arc length before it finishes it, because it would have already been at that angle.
Yeah, I mean, like your observations say, once you clear refraction.
Right, but that didn't happen or affect the measurement. Like as Mike said, like the globe exists as a refraction correction. Like the linear relationship of 60 nautical miles per degree only exists as an apparent model for a certain angular band, and the actual descent rate of the stars doesn't even follow that rate. That's right! You can look at them here, as measured by mountain peaks, using the internally consistent coordinate system.
Oh, well, the band again was the 30 degrees to 90?
No, it's like 30 to 70, something like that.
20 to 70 or something like that. Yeah.
And then not above 70?
Nope.
Well, the deviation from that doesn't, the deviation from the 15 degrees per hour from 90 to 70 is very, very small. So like as you go from like sub 70 to like, 30, 40 or 40, 30, that's where you start to get the, increasing deviations, and then lower than that, it increases. So.
But it sounds like
not
you're
linear,
saying
basically, in those ranges. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I don't.
Yeah.
That seems. I haven't looked into it, but that seems like it's probably not true.
What?
Well, I mean, you could go into Stellarium and look at, just pick a random star, and then look at the refraction correction when it's 2 to 3 arc minutes below the horizon, and then rewind it back so that it goes up to like as high as it'll go for that observer, and look at how the refraction corrections change per 10 degrees of refraction. And actually, there's I can pull up this manual here.
Well, to be clear, I'm not talking about at the horizon. I believe that's true. It seems like it's when you get up to 30. I would assume it's 30 degrees all the way up. I'd never heard that there was also a correction when you got near zenith.
No, when you're at zenith, there's the least amount of corrections that apply, and that's actually the position that they take for the reference for the true position to add 15 degrees per hour to, because it would be theoretically the most closely aligned position to wherever the light source of that star is, whether it be 60 billion light years away or what have you, or closer. But in any case, that would be the spot where it's the least amount refracted to use for a reference, and that's what they did. Let me
Yeah.
see.
So then the 1 degree per 60 nautical miles would work from there. I'm assuming all the way down to get near the horizon, right?
No, I'm saying every 10 degrees of elevation band, there's a different amount of refraction that's applied to keep that angular amount good for celestial navigation to relate the true position.
Out of curiosity, have you ever done the calculations for, like, if you're saying this is all BS the globe theory uses to hide the flatness, have you ever done calculations for what sort of effects you'd expect from flat over long distances? Because, like, over these shorter distances that you can actually see observations, the difference aren't too big. But if you're looking at Polaris as you go down towards the equator, like, what? Have you ever done the math for that?
Come again?
So I'm just thinking, like, we know the ground position of Polaris. For simplicity, let's say North Pole. A little off, but close enough. And as you go down towards the equator, it gets lower and lower in the sky, obviously. So if you're saying that, like, these refraction corrections, all this stuff is just fake BS stuff Globers have made up to hide the flat reality. And we shouldn't do any of that. We shouldn't think about it that way. Have you done the calculations based on just ignoring all the globe theory stuff, all the celestial fraction, all that? Just throw all that away, go from scratch with something that is nice, simple, easy, like Polaris, and figure out where it should be in the sky given the distance to the North Pole and the angle you see it at.
It would be whatever it is currently, because that's what it is currently.
Yeah, but he's asking if you've done
the refraction
trigonometric.
correction. The refraction correction differences are exactly what is needed to make it useful at that 60 nautical mile rate when it doesn't follow that.
But I'm saying your theory is it doesn't follow that. Those refraction corrections are BS, right? Correct me wrong here.
You would never know, because all that's being referenced is the apparent position after you have the zenith transit. So if you're assuming 50 nautical, if you're assuming that linear relationship in 15 in the nautical or in the angular descent of 15 degrees per hour, then there would be no difference in what you see. You would just explain the difference as refraction. So there's no way to calculate a different thing for what it truly is. That's just whatever optical effect. Like I think that the reason that it doesn't obey that is a combination of refraction and the fact that our optics are non-Euclidean. So that's why I think that it doesn't deviate at that fixed angular 15 degree per hour descent rate. And that's all that's needed, because when you say, like, can you calculate the difference and stuff? Well, this mountain peak certainly tells the difference between the angular or between the true position descent rate and the apparent position that we see. So you could reference it that way, but I'm not even trying to do that. This doesn't serve any purpose.
I think his question might be leading to how on a flat Earth are you getting, say, Polaris on the horizon at the equator? How does that work on the flat Earth?
You remember this tu quoque fallacy we were talking about, Gio? Remember? We're just talking.
No,
about
I just asked a legitimate question.
It's just optics. It's just how we see. We see in a sphere. As you get further away from things, as they get lower in the horizon, they get more compressed. They get angularly lower. It's just we see in a sphere.
Yeah, like nothing changed about your vision.
Yeah, like check this out. A lot of people are like, "Oh, the dome of vision, that's dog shit. You guys just made it up. Flat Earth's stupid. Yada yada." This dome of vision is the same as this dome of vision that's used in this model, where the globe is the globe shape instead of being on a different projection type. The apparent dome that we see in is true for both models. The linear drop rate and all of that is what's physically asserted for the globe, because that's what makes the coordinate system for them binding that GP to a specific spot on the ground. It's all predicated on a specific rate of descent and time.
Right, they're equivalent because they're both using the same projection.
Yeah, so nothing changes, and we all agree that when you use the coordinate system, that star will have a relative GP based on that 15 degree per hour angular descent rate and movement rate relative to the 60 nautical mile per degree relationship established for that interval of descent. That's what makes the symmetry of the coordinate system. Like, no one is contesting that, but you would never know the difference unless there was, I don't know, a mountain peak in between you and a star, and you were calculating occlusion differences.
Right. Yeah, I want to send you a timestamp video. That guy is just kind of explaining the basics. so people can kind of like visualize it.
Oh, nice. Is it Yeah, we can play this out.
Just so for people to get a better
stars
grasp,
would appear to
if you're
spin
not too familiar with celestial mechanics and stuff.
around a circle, and the axis of that circle at the zenith, the point overhead we talked about earlier.
The sound's kind
That
of
point
off.
in the sky around which the stars.
Sounds horrible. What's wrong with it?
I don't know. It's fine on my end.
It's like it's being staticky.
Maybe try now.
My question would be like, you say this, that's just how we see. How do you know that's how we see?
There you go.
Because that's literally what we see.
It's how you see, bro. Curved visual space.
Yeah, we've looked at some research papers on that.
No, I've never seen a research paper that says that we see in the way that the personal azimuthal grid of vision says we see.
Promise you.
Oh, I got you. 1 second.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Get it. Not only is there research papers, but there's multiple from different scientists. I like Lunenburg. He's my favorite curved visual space guy.
I was just like, all right, dude, just give me a sec. I got you.
All right. So earlier when we started, actually, you know what? Let's start with Umland first. So all observations are described as a hemisphere of vision and putting the observer in the center. That literally creates the azimuthal grid. That creates the 60 nautical mile per degree relationship. That's what merges the globe to the celestial sphere. So that's like hint number 1 that they're related. That's how they always describe it. So let's see here. Calculations from the celestial navigation always refer to the geocentric altitude of the body. Altitude when measured by a fictitious observer being on the plane of the celestial horizon at the center of the Earth, which coincides with the center of the celestial sphere. So literally mapping it to that to start us off with. Now we'll get into some descriptions from a book from, let's see, this was 1777. Oh, the same year the king made the royal decree to use his coordinate system. So this book is the grammar and situation and extents of all countries and histories and kingdoms of the world. Basically, this guy traveled to different kingdoms, asked them about their religion and navigation and cosmology, etc. So anyway, they talk about how in the Europeans, they're using this celestial sphere model and to describe the northern hemisphere and the southern hemisphere. And, a spectator spanning the surface of the earth can freely see half of the heavens, which seems to be above him, the other half being under the earth beneath him. Now, the apparent plane or flat of the flat hands, which is that they're not saying the earth's flat here. They're just referencing the fundamental plane of the coordinate system, which is that geocentric position that they use. Yada yada goes on to talk about the celestial bodies. Later, we will chiefly find that there is a greater conviction of the subject of geography. Nope, that's not related.
You can read that right there, the horizon one.
Where at?
Now, if the apparent plane, or flat, which he stands on, was conceived to be extended till it met the heavens, it would there be bounded, apparently, by a great circle called the horizon, which divides the visible from the invisible hemisphere.
Oh, thank you. There you go. Yeah, so there's clue number 2. Then we have a reference in 1892. This is Old and New Astronomy. This is some guy writing about astronomy or whatever, an old textbook. He says, overhead is the dome of the heavens, which is as far determined by the actual position of the visible bodies, like the heavenly orbs or the blue sky, or by the clouds, and as in reality has no definable shape, but which may be geometrically regarded as a hemisphere around O as a center. So if you were O here, the observer at the center, this is what you would be seeing. There's our fundamental plane, celestial sphere expanded outward from that. It is not intended that the natural idea of the observer, whom the dome of the heavens appears somewhat flat in form, the horizon being between 3 and 4 times as far away as the region overhead. In considering the cloudy sky, we must remember that if we were to rightly understand what we see, that usually the curved surface at which we look at is much flatter than it even is, or than this, we mistakenly attribute the dome shape of the heavens, whereas in reality, the curvature is no greater than the curvature of Earth itself, which under ordinary conditions is imperceptible. So we only see the curved part of the heavens. So when we go back to, I just closed it out. Sorry about that. So when we go back to these references to conceptual models, the azimuthal dome of vision, this is what creates the graticule, the coordinate system that this projection is, that this observer is standing on and referencing. Same here, same exact thing. We always are referencing the apparent, and I'll do one more to give some more context, just for good measure. Debate thumbnails. I need This one, I think. All right. So if anyone needs references on curved visual space, I have several sections in my Zotero that I can export. But here is some leads. I highly recommend. Where's that one that Wagner? There's one by Wagner right here. The Geometries of Visual Space. This guy gives a detailed summary of like 15 different visual space theories.
That one's great.
That all cover like where they experimentally fail, where they exceed, et cetera, because there doesn't seem to be one unifying way to describe optics in Euclidean spherical or hyperbolic geometry or anything like that. It seems to be a mix of a logarithmic scale where it's dependent on different distances. It's dynamic as you get further away. It more scales like that where the effects change. So you can read more about that in any one of these, but I highly recommend starting with Wagner because he covers all the big ones and breaks it down pretty easy.
No, I think Wagner's one that Gleam shared, but that doesn't support the personal azimuthal grid of vision. That one's, if I remember right, that one's a personal. It's like a psychology paper on human perception. But we could we can take eyeballs out of it and capture things on a sensor and we don't have to worry about all that. Like the human brain side of it.
It's literally a book explaining how we don't see in Euclidean parallel lines and things converge at the horizon, etc. That's what.
Do you think that's true of a camera?
Listen, is it true in reality that when you're looking at train tracks, they appear to converge, but they don't actually? That's all you really need to know.
Yeah, but that's not curved visual space. That's just perspective.
That's curved visual space, dude.
No, it's not. Like train tracks converging is not curved visual space.
All right, so 1 second, dude. We're gonna go to.
What do you think perspective means?
Hold on, dog.
Perspective is just it's straight light rays converging, and there's basic math that will predict like.
Now all the light rays are straight.
Yeah, they're not converging in a Euclidean apparent at the infinity position or whatever. There's whole studies on all of that, and that guy that you tried to say was doing like a psychology experiment on perception. It's literally about mapping things in three-dimensional space versus where you perceive them based on that deviation. And does that deviation follow a hyperbolic negative curvature? Does it follow spherical curvature? What type of this is what these people where theories were about, and that's what that dude's book summarizes. And you would know that if you actually read it.
No, you just agreed with me. You said his book's about human perception. They basically set people up. These are all short distance things, by the way. And they would set people up and they'd say like how far, like stand straight, turn sideways, look over your shoulders and tell us like how far away do you think that stick is, or which way is it pointing? Hold on. And then they would say, okay, how far off was that person from where that thing actually is? And then they would map those, and they found that people consistently misjudge distances.
Right. Why is the term 20/20 vision used?
Hold on. 1 second. So 1 second. If they misjudge things closely, right, physical objects, what would you think that would mean for objects in the sky? And then number two, how you perceive things is literally how, like that rate of change is literally how the graticule is made, establishing that 69-mile nautical relationship. So it's literally based on how you perceive the sky. Trying to change the terminology doesn't make it a different conversation. You still see in that exact same way. And I'm about to.
So to your first question, I think you asked a question. Can I answer it?
Yeah, go ahead.
Or okay. You said if it's bad for things that are close, how is it for things that are far? I don't know. Honestly, it might be bad, but my guess is if you took people outside and you showed them Polaris and you said, what angle is that? And you just had them guess it. I imagine people would probably be off. But if we went out and we set up a camera that was leveled, for example, with basically known specs, it's going to be pretty extremely close, right? At finding the actual, if you got a theodolite, a camera, it's going to be correct. That's my point about I think when you mix human perception in, it muddies the waters.
Yeah, it's still going to be a factor, and everything that is based off of the literal positions of the stars as you perceive them is what supposedly defines the globe. So anyway, here's another left and right eye. This is called a Vith-Muller circle. This is a theory describing optics and the nonlinear change in position over distance for objects as seen by an observer. What he describes this as you take a circle, slice both eyes in half, and then rotate the circle 360 degrees. It creates this latitude longitude grid that we're looking at here. So as things are closer, they're not separated as much. There's not that deviation from where they're actually at in 3D space, versus when they get out here, there's a different amount of separation there. showing the exact same conceptualization. And then I got one more quote that I'm looking for from Lundberg, which should be up here at the top. Yeah. Okay. So this is Lundberg saying, talking about the visual field and the spatial field, and because it's asserted in mainstream optics that, we see in Euclidean vision and all that. But he gives the example here of how the sun and the stars are great astronomical bodies, but the sun we see at only 0.5 degrees angular size, and the other celestial bodies are like a couple of arc minutes in size. So he's saying that the only way that can happen is if there was a deviation from seeing in 3D Euclidean geometry. So
I'll
it's pretty.
Can I read it real quick? Right there.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. It says, however, we cannot be sure that the map truly represents the sense qualities of form and localization of objects. This would be the case if the apparent distance of any two sensed points were always proportional to the geometrical distance of the associated points of the Euclidean map. Clearly, this is not true. Astronomical objects like the sun or the moon are seen at finite distances. Their sensed size is also finite and in no way proportional to astronomical dimensions. Even the sky itself gives the impression of a dome of finite radius. There you go. I mean, I can keep going if you want.
No, you're good. It's a well-studied thing in how we perceive things, and then so that's basically the back. And then you get into like the studies of alley experiments and stuff, which are closer. But the main point of those is that if we saw in Euclidean geometry that when they plot out the errors in their measurements for the people and where they perceive things, the x and y axes should never intersect when they plot those out, and they always do. So the implication is that they're not seeing in parallel lines. So anyway, the big takeaway from that, though, is that in both models, we're using our vision to construct a map. And in this case, the globe lads have solidified a specific angular descent rate and built everything, time synchronized on that. And so long as everyone agrees to use that coordinate system, then the apparent ground position as defined by the exactitude of the 15 degree per hour angular descent will be accurate for people to use, because they're all using the same system. Whether or not that ground position actually exists at that time or not for the observer doesn't matter, because they're referencing that internally in the coordinate system, and it's going to work. It's going to be symmetrical, and it's going to give you the correct reference for where the star would be at that time.
Yep.
All right. I don't feel like you like addressed the question. I mean, we kind of like wandered into different areas, but I do agree that we perceive the sky as a dome of finite radius. I believe. I mean, that seems apparent. What I was getting at was the idea that this dome is that we live on a flat plane, and that the stars, as they move through the sky, they move at like we would expect them to move according to normal perspective, which means that the further away they get, the slower that they would drop. Whereas what we see in reality is a linear drop. That part, that's the azimuthal grid has other things with like azimuths shifting, but that's the big thing that I feel like it's an assertion you guys make it doesn't feel very.
We don't see a
justified.
linear drop, though.
I was going to say, yeah, we don't see a linear drop, especially
that's why they have these extreme corrections to make the apparent position, still tied to the ground position that's moving at 15 degrees per hour.
Well, like it's 70. At 70 degrees. What's the correction? What's the correction at 70 degrees?
Almost nothing.
Very minimal. Very minimal.
That's my premise, Pinky. Have you been listening?
No, I've been listening. I've been listening. What I think is like you're communicating it so that.
So listen,
I have been listening. Yes.
So you have been listening. So I said there's a linear band which they use and assume that is the fixed angular descent rate within that band for the 15 degree per hour relationship. As things get closer, there's a deviation. Now it's assumed that deviation is only the apparent position in the globe model. I'm saying that these Cel-Theo measurements, the reason that they include earlier is because the angular relationship isn't even being followed, or that 15 degree per hour descent rate for the true position isn't even being followed. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, it's probably not. We're probably off track with it, but I feel like you're sort of like brushing over the 30 to 70, where basically there's no correction, and yet the sky's behaving in a way that is not what we would see with perspective.
And even at the horizon, it's only about half a degree. Like, you're not talking about massive. Like, you phrase it like it's a massive correction, but it's about half a degree at the horizon. These are not large corrections.
There's the least amount of angular separation when it's directly above you. Of course, that's a linear portion. That's what we're
Yeah.
saying. That it's non-linear. That's what, like, when I was going over the where's that Vith-Mueller torus at?
Like all the way from
Well, anyway,
zenith to horizon, half a degree.
Anyway, it doesn't follow that linear relationship, and that's the purpose of these corrections.
Correct. And this is why, if you look at any celestial navigation, guide or article or anything like that, or any nautical almanac, in terms of stars to use, they only use stars that are in that band.
Yeah, like they're above 30 degrees, right?
Yeah, there's a reason for that.
Exactly.
We know.
We understand that.
But there's a specific that, and we're saying that coordinate system establishes internal consistency based off of the apparent position, and assuming that the light source also is following that 15 degree per hour angular relationship. And we're saying they're not. That's not what's happening. And as you get into the lower elevation bands, they start applying formulaic corrections that have to model fit. Because if it's not the correct amount, then the star's ground position has no physical meaning in the coordinate system. That's all.
Yes.
That's all we're saying about the refraction thing.
Curve fit formula. That's what we've been saying for 30 presentations.
And then we got on to optics and how that works. And
yeah, play that little
don't
video for
predict-
people.
I will.
No one addressed my 2020 comment earlier.
Give me a
Get to
second.
that.
We're gonna play out this video real quick. I'm gonna put it at 1x or whatever.
Fine.
Is the celestial pole. Of course, you likely won't ever see that because no one lives at the North Pole. So as we move downwards in latitude in the northern hemisphere, that point in the sky around which the stars rotate will move down towards the north part of the horizon. If you're in the upper latitudes, it will appear higher in the sky. The nearer you are to the equator, the closer that point is going to be to the northern horizon. If you've ever looked at a globe with latitude and longitude lines on it, you can probably imagine pretty easily our next set of markings in the sky, the celestial sphere. To locate objects in the sky, we use coordinates like on Earth, but instead of latitude and longitude, we project those lines out into space as if they were on a transparent sphere surrounding Earth. And these are called right ascension and declination. Right ascension is actually easy to remember. If you face north and the sun rises in the east, which side of your body is that on? Well, it's on the right side. So the sun ascends from your right, or right ascension. These are like the longitude lines on Earth that start at one pole and run to the other pole in equal spacings. Now in right ascension, they're listed in hours and minutes, and the 0 hour for right ascension begins in Aries the Ram, which is a zodiac constellation.
First point of
Easy
Aries.
enough, right? And declination is simply the number of degrees away from the celestial poles. So the degrees from the celestial pole to the celestial equator is 90 degrees, the equator itself being 0, just like the degrees from our North Pole to our equator on Earth. With me so far? Great. So let's review these quickly. North, east, southwest never change, of course. The meridian splits the sky in two halves from north to south. The zenith is directly overhead. The ecliptic is the path the sun takes in the sky, along which the planets largely appear to follow. The celestial pole is the spot in the sky around which the stars appear to rotate as the Earth spins. The celestial sphere uses similar coordinates as longitude and latitude, but are called right ascension and declination. Not hard at all, right? Okay, right ascension and declination may take a bit getting used to, but the rest should be pretty straightforward. In the next video, I'll explain how to understand the difference between brightness of objects in the sky.
Pretty little good summary on it. So longitude and latitude, right? Longitude, right ascension, latitude, declination.
Thank you, sir.
Yep.
Really useful.
I have one
for
more question, then I'll
understanding
drop
these celestial and
off.
terrestrial spheres. Yes, go ahead.
So because I think most of these mountain ones, just by nature of being further away from the mountain, they're going to tend to be really close to the horizon. I've been doing some. I have a program I'm writing to evaluate some of the eclipse data. I'm curious what you think will happen when we do the eclipse stuff up, because most of those are going to be up above 30 degrees. So refraction is going to be, I would say more or less a non-issue. Do you think that will hold true? That
It's a little different subject, but if you want to tackle it, Alan.
Yeah, Brian has it plotted out on one of the things in the what do you call it?
Yeah,
the
just type in eclipses.
Yeah, the PDF.
Yeah, let me see here. Brian,
There you go.
eclipses. Let's see that one.
It's like
Right
near
here.
the bottom almost. Oh, there it is. Yeah.
Here you go. I think this was the comparison and deviation. So they're pretty close, following right, or I think it started at 70, yeah, right here. So they're pretty close right here, and then they start to deviate as time goes on.
Phantom, you're echoing.
Yeah, you're echoing. Sorry. You can see the deviation right here.
Yeah. So what do you think causes that deviation?
Optics, just how we perceive it.
Yeah. the thing that's.
Well, no, like what? Like if we looked at five different eclipses, when
Hold on one second. There you go.
Yeah, say we looked at 5 different eclipses. Where like would it always be on the ends that it would diverge? Is it when the eclipse is on the horizon?
I would assume so. I would assume it would look very similar to this.
Cool. That's it for me.
Alrighty. And then let's see, Killin, or what was your Clint had a question.
Oh crap! I haven't been watching chat.
No, it's Rob on the level. You had a question.
Rob's running to his mic. He's out of breath.
I'll give him a couple of seconds here.
Yeah, you asked about 20/20 vision, and to answer his question, that means if you've got 20/20 vision, you see at 20 feet what a normal vision person sees at 20 feet. That's all that means.
Yeah,
I think there's more to it than that, Left Lane. I think if you asked an optometrist, we'd get a different answer. Don't worry, I'll Google it myself.
Well,
that's what my optometrist told me, so I don't know.
Yeah, I don't necessarily disagree. Yeah, I think it's related to like when they give you the test to see if you can resolve the letters. It's like your ability to resolve things at a distance, right? So, all right, if that's it, we're gonna go ahead and wrap up for the year, lads and ladettes. Next time I see you boys, it'll be an entirely new year.
Man, so quick. Oh wait, Rob's here. Oh, Rob, did you have a quick question? You said.
Well, I did, but Left Lane tried to answer it with something he says his optometrist told him. Why we use the term? Yeah, why we use the term 20/20 vision when dealing with optics?
Because the standard seating for an eye
lads.
test is 20 feet away from the thing. Mark someone 20 feet away and have a standard of what the average person can see is how well they see it at 20 feet. If they are 20 feet away, they see it as well as a normal person sees it from 100 feet away, they have 2100 vision. It's pretty bad. They see it as well as, a normal person sees it from 10 feet, they have really good vision, 20/10.
Tagged you, Acelius. I can't pronounce your name. I'm sorry.
Acelius.
Tagged you and Pinky with that book. The entire geometries of visual space. That way, there's no confusion next time. Not saying from you. Acelius.
I'm in the middle of moving house, so I don't
Can you tag me in that too, please?
Yeah.
Thank you, Gally.
Not Gally, but okay.
Beasticle, sorry. My bad. At least I can call you Tora.
Hey, Alan, can I ask something real quick? So at the end of the day, like in a way, does this come down to like star drop versus they're claiming the actual ground or the Earth itself is dropping, but actually what's really only happening is just star drop, essentially.
Yep, essentially, it's just star drop and not even at the rate.
Not even star drop. Yeah. It's just moving away.
Yeah, it fits with the
essentially
planar geometries.
Yeah.
Yep.
What if we thought of the sky as flat also?
Well, the celestial sphere is a sphere of infinite radius, and that is technically flat. So
sphere of infinite radius is flat.
Touche.
Thank you, gentlemen.
The only thing that links them together is that 60 nautical miles per degree. That's based off of the radius value. That's the only thing that links them together. But anyway, sorry, continue.
Yep. Just we will catch you guys on the next one. We're gonna try and get some repeat measurements at Getaway Mountain when it clears up a little bit. And I heard Cyrus is also looking to get some measures in. And Gio, I heard you were gonna get some measures in as well. Is that true? Confirm?
Well, it came up the other day. Actually, Bull Knight was posting the link and talking about the Cel-Theo bounty, and he was bringing it up. I was just saying, I was outside looking at the sun, and I live in a very mountainous region. So I said, I was like, wow, the mountains out here. And then Bull Knight was like, oh, you should do a Cel-Theo measurement. And we started thinking about it. The thing is, the mountains that are right near me are much closer, though. So I would have to probably get up at some other altitude and even see what I could see. Yeah,
we want all angles because we want to see the difference in true and apparent position for them. We want it all. Like if you any angle and distance is good, even if it's not going to show like Earth curvature significance, it'll still be significant in the deviation for the celestial sphere, which is based on their true position. So it'll still be good.
Yeah, so Bull Knight had kind of brought it up, and then I was talking about the mountains around me, and then Cyrus came in and he got sparked and like interested, and
Nice.
yeah, so dude, he just instantly went to it, and he has I think he said he has a P900, P950, and he also has like a different camera as well, like the DSLR one. So that one is what he was, and he came in I think like last night, and he was like, "Does anyone know about camera settings?" And he basically, the ISO and all the settings to get it, and yeah, and then he was gonna do it, but it was like really windy, so he was more just kind of getting everything set up. But we did it on the live stream a day or two ago, where we pulled up Peak Finder, we compared it to Google Maps and all of the his coordinates. We did it all live on here.
Nice.
So yeah, so man, that
Self-going with the boys.
yeah, and then we were trying to find like pretty much one of the longer ones because he was attracted to that, and I was mentioning how potentially in the desert, because it's more dry and the unique conditions, he might be at a place where he can get one of these really long rangers, because that's my understanding. Like even like sunsets in the desert, sometimes they can just fade to a tiny little dot because it's so dry and you can see the sun for so far, just because of the environment, like less moisture, and it does seem like that's the case. I mean, this one, if the furthest might be about 170 kilometers. It seems like if he got up on the other mountain, even without that though, like 150. And the thing is, he can see it with his naked eye, so it's pretty clear. And then the camera, like you saw the preliminary pictures. Isn't that one of the most like kind of? It just looks really like it's going to be amazing. It looks incredible in terms of the detail and the distance that it potentially is going to be.
Yeah, I can't wait to see some stars hitting that bad boy.
Great presentation, Alan. Catch you guys later. I gotta make some calls.
Yeah, I'll pull up Cyrus's screenshot real quick.
Oh, really? Ooh, let me see this real quick.
Yeah, take a quick Gandy.
Little preview.
Now, obviously, we will be playing Mega Bonk later. So
wow,
it's called Granite Peak.
That's right? A peak, dude. Woo!
Yeah, I think that's the one from
awesome,
that's the one from ground level, and then there's another. So there's actually like Granite Mountain and Granite Peak, and ironically, one of them is in his east and one of them is in his west. So it's like there's two. They're both called Granite, but one's the mountain and one's the peak, and that one's the peak. So he could go potentially up on the Granite Mountain and look at the peak, which would be at a much higher altitude. Well, somewhat higher altitude, and then from a further distance too. Yeah, so kind of get a higher peak from it there, because right there it's like a little bit behind that. It's basically in the middle, like that hump right in the middle.
Right there.
Just kind of
middle. About crazy to get this bad boy over here.
Yeah, that one looks because that one even because it might be further.
Yeah, that one's hella far.
Yeah, it looks like it's on a whole back layer. Yeah, but the Granite one is the like pretty much dead center. Yeah, right there. Yeah. That's the Granite.
Yeah, there's lots of good potential here. Can't wait to see what happens. So yeah, quick recap before we wrap up. There's the Celestial Theodolite Rewards Program. A link is in the chat there. But basically, if you live in the Southern Hemisphere right now, if you take a Celestial Theodolite measurement that's sub 128 kilometers, you'll get $100. If you have one that's over that, you get $200. In the Northern Hemisphere, you get $50 per peak. And if it's over 128 kilometers, you get $100. We have a current prize pool of $500. It's first come, first serve. So get those in while supplies last, as they say. And then here's how to contact me, contact information, and upload the information. And all you need is your observer location, latitude, longitude coordinates, the target peak name. So if you can look that up on Peak Finder, and then we can get the lati and longi of that later. But we need to know the peak, and then the timing information. So we need to know when you started your recording of the star occlusion. So your device needs to be synchronized with GPS time, and if you can have it so that either a thumbnail, or either a timestamp is displayed in the video, or if the file name when you create the file is based off of the current time, based off of whatever GPS time it's synced to, that would be super useful. That's all you need to do to make a successful measurement there. And then the quality, in terms of quality, you need to be able to define the peak. You need to be able to see the star. So if you can get something that looks about like this, could be a little worse, could be a little better. Doesn't matter if you can get something around this range, you're good to go. As long as it's definable. If you're having trouble with the peak at night, you can record a little like at sunset and get the silhouette, and then reference that recording later. As long as you don't move the device. All right, that is everything. I'll see you guys next year.
Cheers, Alan. Yeah, man. Happy New Year.
You too, bro.
What do you think for 2026?
More Cel-Theo measurements.
It's going to be the year of the water level.
Yeah, predictions for what? Like in terms of the state of flat Earth, or?
No, I just kind of threw it out there in general. Just if there's any thoughts, since we're only a few days away now. Just a few last days.
I haven't thought about it at all.
At least by that calendar. I mean, if you even take that calendar as being the first of the year, because really, like springtime is often was the first of the year.
Dude, it's the old fake first of the year. I hate how they did that.
Right.
They just faked us out.
Yeah. They definitely pulled the fake move and just got everyone to be like, Jesus, New Year, and then started over. For some reason, they want it. It's not necessarily Jesus. Christmas is other things too, but they did seem to kind of link it with the Christianity, with Christmas.
No, they also, they take him on both sides. They're like, he's on Christmas is when he died, and the one is when he was reborn, wasn't it? Or resurrected? I can't remember.
Yeah. Yeah, it is connected to that cycle, it seems like, at least in that kind of symbolic way. But yeah, man, no, that's excellent, man. There's so much good information that you just went through. And yeah, like star drop versus ground drop. And they claim both is happening and use refraction, and it's really just star drop with planar geometry. That's pretty incredible how they've hid it in there as well as they have for this long.
Think about how crazy it is that the referenced ground position doesn't have to actually be the ground position, but within the coordinate system, that would be the ground position, and you could use that because the way that they have it fixed to the 15 degree per hour rate. So although you'll never, without an occlusion or something, you would never know the difference, because as long as you can see the star, it's going to be able to be used on their coordinate system relative to that fictitious observer to set the angular descent rate.
Yeah, so they're like adding in curvature and then adding in a specifically set refraction to account for said curvature that they already added, but neither one are even there. Well, there is some refraction, but there's not the actual surface of the Earth that has to be accounted for in the drop rate. Because if they claim you're on an actual ball, then you have the drop and the motion of the actual ground versus just the sky. It made me think, like, do you think like the celestial sphere, like if we were to imagine like a radius around us that we can see, and then in a way that links to under the ground, even though in the globe they claim that actually is going under a ball, but you could just hypothetically think of it as like a continued radius as it goes all around you, basically like 360 degrees in all directions.
That's exactly what it is. I think that's what, and then like your vision just creates that arcing into the horizon as it gets further away. And then, they only reference it's a conceptual model based off of apparent positions and assuming a linear angular descent rate at a fixed interval.
And then do you think the radius of the globe Earth is essentially pulled from the radius of our vision? That it's a one-to-one that way, like the hemisphere above us and the hemisphere below us, like on a planar surface, accounts for like the two portions, like the from your feet up and then from your feet down, basically 360 all around you.
Shoot, say that again. I got distracted and read something at the same time. What was your question?
No, it's all good. No, I was just saying that thing, like where if you have like a hemisphere of visual space above you, and then you're going to have like an equal hemisphere of below, and because those two have the same radius, they just took the radius of our vision and turned it into the radius of being on a sphere.
Yeah. So they took that linear portion of like, so think about this, right? You have a star at zenith. Its apparent position is supposed to be moving at 15 degrees per hour, right? So you take your zenith measurement, an hour later, it's 15 degrees, different position, and you make your measurement. You're like, okay, it lined up with that. Another hour goes by, and now it's supposed to be 30 degrees in difference. And what you measure is like a deviation from where it's expected to be, with its apparent position following that. So you say, okay, that must mean that the light source is, moving, and we don't see that. We see the light that's coming at us, that's reaching us, and that must be being refracted by this much amount. And that's what they did all the way down to zero. And like that, when you have that, when you take that portion of where it, closely follows the 15 degree per hour mark, that's where they established the 59 or the 3959, perfect radius to make it follow that as the baseline, because you need a baseline for everything, to start your metric to compare it to. So they started with that as their baseline, and then deviations from that are explained as, refraction. whether or not that amount of refraction actually exists or not. It's what connects it angularly to its original 15 degree per hour, once the zenith measurement position. So, and then in the South, right, the Chinese, when I was reading the history of Chinese and what they did, when they went to the South, their whole goal was to finally map out the star Canopus so that, or, to get a zenith measurement of it and then sail away from it so they could establish a 60 nautical mile per degree relationship as the same as they had for Polaris. Now, obviously, they didn't use nautical miles; they used a lee, so their relative term would be, 60 nautical lees per, just kind of making it familiar so we all understand what they were doing. But they were establishing that same angular drop rate for symmetry, and then after that, they went and camped up on some different islands and stuff, and watched some eclipses and took zenith, and noted what stars were at their zenith when they took those measurements, and then they just mapped out everything using that exact same system. So it's literally built on, like a hypothetical would be idealized perfect scenario. This is where the ground position would be if X, Y, and Z are true for both hemispheres. And then they just merge it together, which makes it, a spherical coordinate system. So they're like, oh, look, it's a ball. When we don't see it, it must be under ball. Even though it was and always has been based off of single zenith measurements for a single observer.
Yeah, man. I mean, it's just huge because, like, to consider how, like, everybody in this, no matter how much people want to say they're against whatever thoughts on it all, but everyone knows, like, it seems that there's clearly a way in which they could hide a geometry within what currently exists, and it's a really big deal in a lot of ways, meaning that for the actual Earth to not even have this spherical geometry in reality, and for them to sell it as that, and like what you're breaking down, yeah, it gets down to how that could actually be slipped in. And I mean, how do you think that has passed even other intellectual people? It's just because they're using a few base assumptions, and then they don't really have the ability to validate on a larger scale, and then therefore the planar geometry can be kind of pocketed within the larger grid system that we're given.
Yeah, it just becomes everything's locally flat and refraction. And then if you want to actually traverse the land, you got to reference the two-sphere model, which is, where they inserted the globe. Because people just used to get a bearing to a star and sail in the direction of it, right? They didn't need to relate its angle to time or anything like that. They just needed to see it, and then they would sail in the direction of it. And I'm assuming that when it reached a certain angular altitude relative to them, they would go, okay, now I need to use like a different star or whatever. So when we're looking at those Rumline maps of how they have, different points for where stars would be, because when you look at the Peri-Reis map, the Falkland Islands is where Canopus has an 88 degree maximum zenith altitude, and that's where they went and sailed to go and get their zenith measurement. So I'm assuming that all the other points on a Rumline type map from the old times that we see are stars that are supposed to be at a specific elevation, and then when you reach that, you just change direction.
So just using that like center part of the band and then extrapolating that into an entire conceptual model that just uses like that one stencil, like a limited stencil of how the sky actually works, and then using the refractive values and being able to like position and then, or like reposition and then unposition the reposition of the assumed model beneath it. Well, yeah, that's what's so amazing about the timing of an occlusion, is that it gives that actual like physical moment in which, like, I think of it like that term, like an internal timing, and then the idea that it kind of shows like the internal workings of the actual system without any assumptions baked into it. And that's what this shows.
It's so awesome. And then like the globe model is actually like a beautiful conceptual model. Like when you understand like how they took it, related it to where a star once was for an observer, took a linear descent rate and made, and because that's going to follow it's going to follow a full 360 degrees, and then they just made that into an entire model for everything based off of time. Because once you have the zenith position of like one star like that, like was talked about earlier before we went live, you can calculate out all the rest, and that's what they do. That's what's done. And relative to that, fixed rate and that fictitious observer, the coordinate system's accurate and internally consistent.
But also Alan, that's like what we observe, right? Like if you move 60 nautical miles away from Polaris, it drops a degree. And that's not planar trig. That's dropping more than you would expect to see with planar trig. And so I think to say like, well, okay, although they were trying to hide it from us, I think most of them just said this is what we see, and this is the simplest explanation for it. And in reality, the personal azimuthal grid has massive, like we're talking about a couple, like I just ran from Polaris to the equator. It's when you get right on the horizon, it's like 11 arc minutes, but the personal azimuthal grid of vision has like tens of degrees of correction.
I don't even know what you're referring to. And the
you can pull up the azimuthal grid of vision.
As I'm replying to multiple things that you said, you're starting to interrupt me a little bit there. But one, I don't even know what you're saying, because what you observe is exactly what was mapped out for the coordinate system. And I never said that you would use plane trig to establish the angular deviation. I specifically cited that there's multiple theories of spherical curvature to explain the rate in which we see a deviation from 3D Euclidean space and the spatial field. So that's not in what we see is literally like the observation alone is what's being used for a reference to like as an idealized reference to set the fictitious observer to make the late linear, whether or not it's linear. So I don't disagree that what we observe as we move away from Polaris is a drop rate. What we disagree with is that when stars get occluded by mountains, they're not even following the 15 degree per hour angular descent rate, let alone occluding at the time that the globe predicts. They're not even following what they predict as an angular descent rate relative to the observer.
So yeah, they're down at the horizon, and I think the globe. I think globies agree with you that.
Guy, it's not the true position can't not obey it. Like, you got to understand that. That's the backbone. That's not affected by how low it is in the horizon. That's a calculated position to be in reference to for the position that you do see.
But how can you call it a true position when geometrically it's impossible for it to be where you see it?
Well, it doesn't matter what we call it. It's the geocentric reference position of where it once was, adding 15 degrees per hour to a light source. So there's nothing, I don't disagree with like conceptually using that as a reference point, but what was shown in the measurements here is that it doesn't truly follow that angular descent rate for its true position, which is what defines the coordinate system to give it a ground position on the ground in the first place, regardless of whether or not the star is millions and zillions of light years or not. To use the coordinate system to make it move at 60 nautical miles per degree, you actually have to merge the celestial and terrestrial spheres together. So by doing that, that's what makes the star move at 60 nautical miles per degree on the coordinate system. So it has to move at that rate.
Is that for all the stars in FE? 60 nautical miles per degree?
That's not so that's the linear relationship for descent, but we're specifically talking about the angular descent, not just the how you see it as you're moving, but like as if you're stationary and the time and rate at which it descends as well. And that's not if you were just going off the apparent position alone and using the model of 15 degrees per hour for the fixed position of the light source, then that's what it would be. But on flat Earth, the true position doesn't appear to be following their conceptualization of where it should be, to the tune of about 27 arc seconds.
And this is for both southern and northern hemiplane?
We have no southern hemiplane measurements yet. We are anxiously awaiting, and there is a delicious $100 to $200 bounty for southern hemisphere measurements.
I got you. Let's say hypothetically, because this is what I suspect is going to happen. This 60 nautical, whatever it is, that it doesn't work for the southern hemis, whatever.
Yeah, I think it's going to be off by more than what the northern hemisphere is off as well, because it doesn't work in the north either. It's already showing deviations from their expected angular descent rate, but I think in the south it'll be more severe.
Is there a minimum distance from the mountain that the observer has to be? Because I'm wondering if we just got some stars that were up above 30, get a star that's at 45 degrees, just get close enough to the mountain to do it. Do we have some of those? I haven't looked at the angles.
Yeah, so the highest angle we have is 10 degrees at about 5.4 miles, something like that. We would like to get some higher ones. Yeah, that would be good, because then we could establish that deviation better. That's what I was telling Gio earlier when he was saying that he's kind of close to the peaks or whatever. But we want, that's not a problem. We want data from as many angles as we could get, so it wouldn't necessarily be a bad thing.
Yeah, because what the numbers I've run on the eclipses thus far, it doesn't work out. But I'll I'll get something more formal prepared for that. And I think in part
Alright.
because they're up higher in the sky and like there's no like refraction for them. Like the refraction is a much lower deal, or at least you could eliminate the data. We have a ton of data points. You could eliminate the ones that are going to be confounded by like horizon refraction. And when
Do you have a
follow
rebuttal?
the LDO method, it just like doesn't work very well.
Do you have any rebuttal for this? Have you put one together? Or?
I'm working on one. So I probably shouldn't say anything. I'll work on something formal that Alan and Shane can poke at. But
No, you're good. I mean, and then when you get it laid out, you're welcome to present it during whenever you get it ready. Just let us know. We can make a Monday of it.
Cool.
All right, lads. I'm gonna head off, retire for the evening, and play Mega Bonk until my mind explodes. If anyone would like to play Code Names, we're gonna do that for a little. We'll see if we can get a game of that going over on the Ether Cause Discord. See you guys later.
Yeah, bro. Peace, Alan. Cheers. Cheers. It was a great show.
Yeah, you can answer that with a yes. We make corrections.
I don't think he was done.
You know, if you take like an apple, it's like a sphere, but then when you slice it down the middle and you look at it from the side, you end up with like the two kind of hemispheres of the apple. I wonder if that's like how this realm is built, kind of like a heart as well. It has a little bit of like an oblateness and a little bit of a heart shaped as well. I've always loved the hard earth, and it may actually be laid out something like that. The way the land all kind of bursts out of the north and then kind of drips down to the south.
Wait, so are you suggesting that it is a curved surface then?
No. Well, I mean, you have elevation and you have tides in the oceans, but up is up and down is down.
I mean, if it's shaped like an apple is curved.
No, I was saying the cross section of an apple.
So we're on the sliced side of the apple.
No, like a flat. If you cut an apple in half, that face of it would like. Is that like that, Gio?
Yeah, the sliced face of the apple is where we're living.